Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome back to day 694 of the news, where we're going to be covering the past major events of the last 24 hours. And there have been some fairly concerning ones coming out of the area of Crimea, as a massive blackout has begun to unfold. We've also seen some hypersonic missile carriers moving to the city of Sevastopol, and we've also been seeing some very interesting developments inside of Belarus, as today an official announcement came out that Belarusian forces are going to be moving a large amount of their armed forces into the area of Russia for quote-unquote training reasons. There is a lot to really a lot to unfold over these past 24 hours, but nevertheless, we are going to cover it step by step all the way through. Of course, really quickly, just to point out, this is a brand new map of the week. This day, Thursday, every single day of the week, marks a brand new week in the war in Ukraine, starting from day 1 on February 24th of 2022. And so you will not be able to find any of the map markers from yesterday on this map. The map is brand new. So if you want to see yesterday's markers, make sure to go click on yesterday's stream, go down in the description below, and click on that link to the day 693 map, as that's the map for the entire week. But beyond that, it is time for us to get into the big news that came out of Crimea today, which is that major blackouts began to wreck the majority of the Crimean peninsula, and appears to have knocked out electricity in major cities such as Sevastopol, Simferopol, where we put the marker, Feodosia, Kerch, Dzhankoy, and Saki. To highlight these areas for y'all independently, and let me make sure to refresh the map there so hopefully we can get an accurate look at this. Dzhankoy is almost in the very most northerly part of the peninsula of Crimea. We can also see that another listing was Saki, and Saki is right over here near Yevpatoria. That is also about as far east as one can go. The blackouts also affected the city of Kerch, the city of Feodosia, Simferopol, and Sevastopol. From what we understand, the blackout area pretty much encompassed almost the entirety of the Crimean peninsula, and especially the parts that are strategically important for Russian forces. We got to see a little bit of video footage here showing the absolutely pitch dark streets, only illuminated by the headlights and taillights of the cars that were passing by. That's the end of that little clip, a very short one, but we also have an additional second one showing these blackouts as well. From what we understand, some of the cities, from what I've heard, have had their electrical supply restored, but not all of them. And I gotta say, it's fairly interesting here, but moving on to our next little clip, we also got to see that pitch black sky over Crimea, because literally no electricity was being provided anywhere throughout the entirety of the peninsula for multiple hours on end. Even at this point, just to make it clear again, some cities have had their power restored, but out of those, it's a smaller amount of them, at least from what we heard when we went live on air. And that's the end of that clip right there. This is also showing a power outage map, and we can see that the majority of Sevastopol was without power. We can also see that BLACKOut, just a little bit further to the south, also was largely without power as well. It appears that rolling blackouts are starting to become a major concern for the Russian Federation, not only within the Russian Federation itself in cities like Moscow, Yaroslavl, Tver, and everywhere in between. We're also starting to see that this is becoming a major issue within occupied territories, and it begs the question, how bad off is Russian energy infrastructure, or Russian-provided energy infrastructure, or how much is the Ukrainian involvement in having these massive blackouts occur? And it's something that we really don't know an exact answer to. Russian energy infrastructure, much like any developed nation's infrastructure, is incredibly vast and quite complex, usually having multiple safeguards to ensure that some electricity can be provided even if one main power line goes out. It's very odd to see that blackouts like these are occurring, and it's indicating that either Russian incompetence is so severe on the private company side, or at least the nationalized company side that provides electricity, that they're now starting to have massive rolling blackouts, or it's showing that Ukrainian activities, whether it be partisan or official Ukrainian military activities, have been knocking out the Russian power grids at a fairly consistent and fairly steadfast rate. Many of y'all have had some ideas and inputs on what y'all believe. And it appears that the majority, well, actually, it's very close, at least in what y'all are thinking opinion-wise. Almost half of y'all, out of the ones that didn't ride the fence, which was about 1 in every 4 of y'all, but out of the 3 out of every other 4, 1.5 of y'all said that it was probably caused by Ukraine, and the other half of y'all said it's probably being caused by sheer Russian incompetence. And at the moment, we can't really tell what it's being caused by. I would actually have to say that y'all's guesses, both of y'all's guesses, are right for the people who did make a clear answer. We don't really know what it is. It could be going either way at this point, or it could be a blend of both. A part incompetence and a part Ukrainian activity. The Ukrainians do have an inherent objective of trying to knock out Russian power grids, because from what we understand, the railroads within the area of Crimea are largely electrified, and the trains that travel over those rails also are electrified as well, and so, therefore, knocking out the power grid in such a major way is bringing the Russian logistics machine to a complete halt, although right now it's largely at a sputter. We also got to see that within the area of Belgrade, apparently a considerably large electrical substation caught on fire as well, and ended up having a pretty fantastic light show over the city of Belgrade. Here's the clip.
Это станция горит.
That's the end of that little clip right there, showing the substation toasting it. And we also have a second clip showing that same substation having a little bit of a toast. This one's a little longer and gives us more of an impressive light show. That which you would find at a Berlin nightclub.
А у нас там что, подстанция?
Да.
It's kind of pretty.
Ёб твою мать, ребенок у нас. Выключить надо. Полностью в доме электричество выключите.
That one would. But nevertheless, still, it appears that, at least in the city of Belgrade, a major electrical substation has also ended up spontaneously combusting and going out as well, and will probably require some pretty significant repairs to get the substation up and running again. Going off of all of this, we are starting to get a very interesting picture that everything in the electrical infrastructure sector in Russia is starting to have problems almost at the exact same time in different parts of the country. Belgrade is well within the Russian Federation. Crimea is not within the Russian Federation. It is an occupied area of Ukraine. But we're seeing that massive blackouts and also electrical issues are starting to plague every part of the country that can be somewhere near Ukraine. And I think it may be indicating that there is some Ukrainian activity that is causing this, or Russian incompetence in fear of sending their workers into this area, or workers just not doing their jobs, is leading to massive infrastructure failures like the ones we're seeing right now. And while I was talking a little bit earlier in Crimea about the strategic significance of such a power outage, considering that a lot of Russia's trains in this area run off of an electrical wire system above the railroad tracks, at the same time, this is also a serious concern for the citizenry. At the moment, it is dreadfully cold across the entire area of Ukraine and Russia in Western Europe as well. At this very moment, for the last century, a lot of areas are going through record cold months and cold days, especially here in Ukraine and in Russia as well. They are starting to get some of the coldest days that they've seen over the last century. I'll have y'all know that this is something very interesting because back during the 1940s, specifically 1942, 1943, and 1944, those were some of the coldest years on record up to that point in history. Of course, in recorded history of when they were tracking weather cycles. But that is still very interesting that the Ukraine War and World War II are kind of having some very similar occurrences, as in the weather is getting extremely cold in the winter months during both of those wars. Not saying that the Ukraine War has turned into World War II yet, but still showing that there are a few similarities here and there that draw back to a truly great war that determined the fate of the modern world as it still stands to this day, and what the Ukraine War is kind of being fought in the shadow of as the aftermath of the Second World War. But moving on from that, I think we can say pretty securely and quite surely that this energy knockout is going to be a very serious blow to the Russians for the amount of time it lasts, which is going to be about a day. And every single day that something like this happens, and every single day that the electrical infrastructure has some kind of a critical failure like this, we'll see that the Russians' logistics and supplies get backlogged by another day. And they're now way behind schedule. I would say that the Russian supply chains are probably days behind schedule at best every single day, and now they're going to be an additional day behind schedule, which is a very big deal and not necessarily the best thing for the Russians, who are still trying to find a way to win what will be an unwinnable war for them. Speaking of unwinnable, the Russians are still going to try their damnedest to find a way to come up with a victory out of nothing. And we got to see that apparently Atesh recorded the transfer of some Onyx supersonic missile carriers in Sevastopol. We got to see some pictures of it moving through the city streets, and apparently a storeyard where these missiles may be held. This appears to be a Russian army barrack. But beyond that, we don't really know a lot more about what this missile carrier would be doing here and who in the world would be firing off this missile. From what we understand, the only hypersonic missile variant that the Russians possess is the Kinzhal hypersonic missile, which is a slightly modified Iskander missile, usually ground-fired. And it doesn't really pose a lot of additional benefits over an Iskander. For the most part, it really is just an Iskander rebranded to sound really cool and intimidating. But beyond that, they really aren't. We don't know what they're doing moving one into Sevastopol. The Russian Air Force operates off of an airbase a little bit further north of Sevastopol, way away from where we're seeing the supply base, which is somewhere in this area of Sevastopol here. The Russian Air Force actually operates out of this airfield way up here on the other side of the city, almost all the way up towards Orlivka, which is, I believe, about 15 miles outside of Sevastopol itself. When we look at this airfield, we can see that there is a decent amount of what appears to be Su-35s, or maybe Su-33s here at this airfield. We're not really seeing a lot of, I would say, Su-24s. In fact, I'm not seeing any of them here in this satellite picture, but once again, this satellite picture is a little dated. This is coming from the midsummer of 2023, and so the air wings may have been rotated at this point. There may be a tactical bomber unit with MiG-31Ks, which are specially designed to carry the Kinzhal hypersonic. Beyond that, however, very odd to see them moving a hypersonic into Sevastopol, and it begs the question, why? And sadly, at the moment, I don't really have a good answer. Maybe y'all can come up with some really good answers in the live chat, and maybe we can work off of those and theorize why they have a hypersonic missile carrier in the city. But moving on from that news inside of Sevastopol and making sure to talk about our Russian world, or as the Russians love to call it, the Ruski Mir first, because there's been a decent amount of action in the Russian world today. We got to see a very interesting and slightly concerning video about something going on inside of Belarus. And I'm going to be showing you all this real quick, because it's showing some Belarusians going on a trip. And I'll turn down the audio a little bit so I can talk over it. But what y'all are seeing right here in this clip are Belarusian soldiers loading up into the back of a Belarusian military transport to travel into the Russian Federation. From what we understand, there is a decent amount of Belarusian soldiers that are going to be taking this little trip from Belarus to Russia, and according to the official statements, they are going to be doing this to try and learn a little bit about how a modern war is fought from the Russian perspective. Well, you see their IL-76 taking off. And there it goes, off to Russia to send these Belarusian soldiers there. The question is, will these soldiers get involved in the war directly? We have seen in the past indications that strongly show that the Belarusians may have provided some of their own military equipment, such as tanks and armored personnel carriers, to the Russians, because the Belarusian identifier for their vehicles is a red square painted onto the side. And we have seen some Russian vehicles that have been destroyed and abandoned on the front lines many months ago that had a very similar red square on them that indicated that they may have been Belarusian Lend-Lease vehicles provided to the Russians. If that's the case, these Belarusian soldiers may not only be going to Russia to try and learn a little bit about what a modern war looks like, they may also be going to Russia to try and get a little involved in a modern war and learn from battlefield experience. I'm sure many of them probably would not return from that little adventure, because many of them don't. Well, many of the Russians don't, at least, and I'm sure that the Belarusians will not either, but if that is the case, that is quite interesting. It may be showing that the Belarusians are trying to take a slightly more semi-active role in the war than they have in the past. So many of y'all know that the Belarusian involvement in the war is something that has been greatly storied and controversied ever since the very beginning. Many people thought that Belarus was going to join the war from the very outset, and during those early months of the war, especially the first two, it did seem like Lukashenko had a very clear idea that Belarus was going to be involved in the war quite soon, even talking about even showing an entire Russian battle plan of where the Russians were going, what they were doing, and how they were going to annex Crimea. And not only that, there was a major buildup of Belarusian forces along Ukraine's northern border for quite a while. After a while, that began to fade away, and rumors came out that apparently the Belarusian military completely bucked the idea of invading Ukraine and outright refused, leaving Lukashenko's hands tied and leaving him to just stay within Belarus, not getting directly involved in the war. However, Belarus is one of Russia's strongest allies, and their only ally at this point within Eastern Europe. And it would not be entirely out of the question to say that a country like Belarus is trying to help out their bigger friend, because in the end, if the Russians win, in the Belarusians' mind and in Lukashenko's mind, he will also win as well. But there is no victory to be had in Russia at the moment, certainly on the economic side of things, which is where a war can end up being lost. Money is one of the most important things that flows through the world, and is what the Ukrainians are constantly asking for from Western countries, because without a continuing flow of hard cash and military support into the Ukrainian economy, the Ukrainians may start to sputter out and lose this war. Russia has no such friends to go around and ask for financial support to help them to continue to try and foot the bill of this incredibly large and incredibly devastating war. The Russian economy has been hit quite heavily over the past 2 years from this ongoing conflict, and it appears that the British Ministry of Defense has come out with a statement today, once again confirming that the Russian economy is in the throes of failing. According to the Minister of Defense, the Central Bank of Russia has increased its interest rate by 1% to a new base rate of 16%, which is absolutely whopping. This is the 5th increase since the current cycle of rises began in July of 2023, when the base rate was set at 6.5%. The interest rates in Russia have risen 9.5% over half a year, to give you an idea of how bad the Russian economy is really doing. The rise has been lower than previous ones, although still it's getting on up there. I mean, the one rise, yeah, I will say that. It's not really a big increase, just 1%, but considering over the past 6 months it's gone up 9.5%, this is pretty damn high, and I know that a lot of y'all also know of certificates of deposits here in the United States and all that kind of stuff. And it's something that I'd have to say, that is a very damn high interest rate, 16%, so whopper. But moving on from that, the Russian inflation continued to accelerate towards the end of 2023, rising to 7.5% year-on-year in November, up from 6.7% in October. Overall inflation for 2023 is estimated to be 7.4% by Russia's statistics service, nearly double the central bank's target. Russia's continued invasion of Ukraine is highly likely to negatively impact the outlook for the Russian economy. Imports have risen faster than exports, likely contributing to the ruble depreciating since the start of the war, highly likely a driver of inflation. As Russia ramps up its defense spending at the cost of other areas, the risk of the Russian economy overheating remains likely. And you can see why a country like Belarus would like to help out in small ways here and there, because even the Russian economic sector itself is starting to show incredibly serious strain just over the past 6 months alone, and is starting to appear to show signs of eventual decay and, as the British Ministry of Defense put it, overheating. And that's something that the Russians have to be very cautious about, because if they allow their economy to continue on in such a way, that may eventually hit the public like a brick. And when that hits the public like a brick, it'll be very similar to what we saw in a nation like Venezuela, which ended up having massive economic upheaval and turmoil because a new kind of a policy was tried out by the government and it ended up failing miserably. And instead of trying to reverse what they did, they doubled down and then just tried to cook books, and that ended up blowing up in their face. Venezuela in the modern day has the most rapid inflation rates ever seen in any nation, and it's almost impossible to for a family to provide for basic necessities for themselves because the currency is so worthless. It's a lot like Weimar Germany during the 1920s and 30s as well, after the Great Depression, which was also a very bad time of upheaval there. We may see something similar to that happen in Russia, and as many of you all know, economic turmoil of that magnitude and nature is usually the greatest driver for political change or governmental change ever seen in world history. Economic upheaval and turmoil such as that was what led to the fall of the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union. It's what led to the fall of the French monarchy. It's what led to the fall of Weimar Germany and the rise of the Nazis. It's really what leads to the rise and fall of many nations and many different kinds of governments. And that may be the way that this war really does end. It may not end on the battlefields of Ukraine. It may end in the coffers of Russia and the failure of the banks to be able to keep up with the incredibly strenuous and difficult situation that Russia finds itself in. But moving on from that news inside of Moscow and Russia, it's time for us to get on to the area of Kyiv, because we got to see a really cool, rare sighting today. Y'all got to see a Belarussian IL-76 just a moment ago. But one thing I bet y'all have not seen in a long time, and I haven't seen this since the beginning of the war, is a Ukrainian IL-76 taking to the skies. We don't know what this little IL-76, well, when I say little, this thing's like the size of a C-17 Globemaster, but we don't really know what this thing was doing today, but it was really cool to see it flying over the suburbs of Kyiv. And there it goes. Oh, look at that. Now, isn't that just neat? I really love those. Let me go pull up Ukrainian IL-76. And let me go get a picture of it here. And so just in case y'all are wondering, what does the paint scheme look like on a Ukrainian IL-76? This is what the particular paint scheme on that IL-76 looked like. It has a blue and yellow stripe, very similar to the Ukrainian flag, going down the entire side, and then they also have a Ukrainian trident painted onto the vertical stabilizer of the IL-76. These things are not really that impressive because IL-76s are a dime a dozen, truly. I mean, thousands of the, well, actually almost 8,000 of them were built. They're really cool, however, I'd have to say. I mean, this is about as big as conventional transport aircraft got in the Soviet Union before you get into the crazy realm of, like, the Antonov 225 and other aircraft similar to those. But the Russian, well, the Soviet Union in particular, always had an obsession with trying to match the West or even outdo the West in cargo carrying capacity and size. The IL-76 was probably one of their best attempts, and you could see that nations all around the world either have IL-76s or their own variants. This is actually a People's Liberation Army Air Force IL-76 from the People's Republic of China, also known as Communist China. You could see a Russian Air Force IL-76, of course, all of y'all know. The two of those were shot down near Kyiv at the beginning of the war. Even countries like Uzbekistan have IL-76s. And you would think that a small country like that probably would have gotten rid of their stock at the collapse of the Soviet Union, but they still have some around because, hey, it's free. But still, it's really neat just to see a Ukrainian IL-76 in the air, for that matter, because the odds of that really happening, slim to none. Very rarely do large transports like that take off in wars like these. The Ukrainians would like to keep it safe, and that may be indicating that this thing is on a very urgent or critical mission, transporting vital supplies for the war effort in another area of the country. But moving on from that little bit of news near Kyiv, which I just thought was really cool to show, it's time for us to move on into the area of our location unknowns. And we have some really cool ones today, starting off with our first one showing a really neat picture. I mean, this thing is just cool. This is a Russian Tiger armored car that has been captured by Ukraine and converted into use for the Ukrainian armed forces. The Tiger armored car is the Russian equivalent of an MRAP or a Max Pro, but a little bit lighter in weight and tonnage. It also sacrifices its actual armor abilities because of that as well. Still, the Ukrainians do not miss an opportunity to use anything that they can find. And so they took their Tiger, they painted it from that Russian army green to this white camo pattern, put a Ukrainian trident on the side, and it now looks like they're conducting training drills out of the Tiger to make sure that their squads know how to function with the Tiger armored car. Just gotta say, it looks beautiful in this white camouflage. Usually in green, it's just kind of meh. You know, it looks kind of like a Rochelle Senator from Canada. But in this white camo, it really does look quite stunning and quite beautiful, I have to say. Wonderful to see, and I'd love to know the Ukrainians are trying to find any opportunity they can to keep their armored forces going. Moving on from that, we also got to see a little bit of Ukrainian anti-air training footage. It was a little short, didn't really show much, but it was cool to see. I would also say that this is probably some kind of a reserve anti-aircraft unit that's stationed near a major city, because their equipment isn't that great. It looks like it's a civilian cargo truck and also an older S-50 anti-aircraft gun. And we can see them firing off their anti-aircraft guns right there. And with that, that's the end of the clip. But very interesting to see what appears to largely be a anti-aircraft unit, an auxiliary one for the most part, doing their job. And hopefully they'll be able to do their job effectively once they get out of training. Still, a very interesting little unit with some odd and quirky equipment. But moving on from that into our next little bit of news, we also got to see a brand new gun drone. Many of y'all know that the Ukrainians have been trying to mitigate the amount of casualties that they may suffer on the battlefield. And a great deal to do with that in the modern world of fighting is with autonomy and trying to create remote-controlled drones, such as the FPV drones, and not only that, to try and create what's called unmanned gun vehicles, or UGVs, like we saw right here. And this thing's pretty cool. It has a PKP machine gun mounted onto it, and it appears to be made off of some kind of a base chassis that's been really modified, so that way it's able to, 1, be controllable, and 2, also operate a machine gun. And also, Paul Schultz, that was the Morse code message of the night. I haven't really been able to recognize the Morse code decoders, but I want to tonight. The Morse code message was, "It's gotten a little dark down here in Crimea, much like the war itself. Long live the LSA." And ding, 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 that's the sound of money. And you got it down on the nail, Paul. That was the Morse code message. And a huge thanks to all the Morse code decoders that I may have not seen tonight. But we can see that dog chasing the gun vehicle here. It looks like it's really having a fun time with it. And it looks like the Ukrainians may be happy with what they've been able to come up with here. This will be able to keep Ukrainian machine gunners in safety and make sure that their machine gun is able to put down a danger onto the Russians. A very serious danger, a great danger indeed. Moving on from that little bit of news, though, and that unmanned gun vehicle, it's time for us to move on to the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours. And the losses have been quite good. We've seen that over the past 24 hours, 13 Bobcat skid steers have been knocked out. A damn fine number right there. And hey, 13 for Enforcer Matt. Hopefully back soon. 780 Russian soldiers had also been knocked out as well. Quite an impressive number, and nearly an entire battalion tactical group. Not only that, but 38 armored personnel carriers were destroyed, a whopper of a number, along with 39 supply trucks, 21 main battle tanks, 24 artillery pieces, 41 drones, 2 MLRSs, and a cruise missile. Overall, the losses in every category today were quite nice, and every single category was larger in size than a singular battalion tactical group, which is a very good measurement of success for the Ukrainian defenders to be able to be knocking out something larger than a battalion tactical group per day of fighting. I'd also have to say that this is once again showing that Russian losses are continuing to stay high. I do not think we're going to see Russian casualties drop again through the war, especially with the massive economic pressures that the Russians are clearly starting to face. They are probably sending soldiers into the meat grinder without any regard at this point, so that way they can hopefully try and eke out some sort of a victory before everything comes crashing down onto the Russian government. But beyond that, absolutely impressive to see, and it's time for us to start moving on into the area of northeastern Ukraine. There's a lot going on throughout the entirety of Ukraine, and one thing that I've got to ask is, as far as foreign support goes for Ukraine, which is something we brought up a little bit earlier, do y'all think that foreign support is going to start to dwindle or increase? As y'all know, there are countries that are currently going through some issues in the background as far as providing support to Ukraine. One of those countries being my very own, the United States of America. Do y'all think that that is eventually going to pass and support is actually going to start going on the up and up again, or is it not? And really quickly, I'm going to throw up a poll on that. Is support for Ukraine going to increase or decrease? And let me type this in real quick. Yes, it will increase soon. Maybe it depends on some nations. And then no, it will begin to dwindle. And let's see what y'all have to say, because I'd be very interested to know, what do y'all think? And of course, that's just being taken as a whole. The United States, Europe, everything included, all in one question. So we're not like asking individually, do you think Sweden's going to up the support or drop it, or do you think Britain's going to up the support and drop it? It's across the board, all support put together. Do you think it's going to increase or decrease? What will it do? But beyond that, and also, really quickly, have to say, please make sure to refrain from politics, because I know that many people are wanting to throw fingers at groups. We do not do that on this channel. I'm not going to have that start on this channel. So please do refrain from politics, because I do not have that here. I'm not going to have the support for Ukraine divided from, one party to the next. That's not how I do it. If you are for Ukraine, you are welcome here. And I'm not going to have folks throwing stones at each other and trying to make it seem like they are a holier-than-thou Ukraine war supporter. Every Ukraine war supporter is a war supporter, period. And I think that they need to be welcomed and always accepted. And I don't think we should be trying to find ways to divide this community off of what really is, in the big picture, some very superficial grounds. But with that, I hope that does address that a little bit fairly well. And with that, it's time for us to start moving on into that northeastern area while y'all answer that little poll. Before we do, however, so many of y'all have been throwing in some amazing stuff in the chat. And Terry Richardson, as one of those interesting things, he said, I think Britain should tax the colonies more. Goodness. But speaking of which, there has been a lot of stuff that y'all have been talking about, and I want to make sure to address those things as best I can. And the first one to throw in a little bit of support to the channel tonight was Duncan McIntosh. Hey! And he said, bye Matt Dinner, and tell him we all miss him. And thank you for the massive support, the incredible massive support, Duncan McIntosh. And yes, I would say that we all do miss him, and hopefully he will be back soon. I will make sure to buy him a dinner. We actually did that tonight. We used the pizza fund to go get a dinner. So yes, we will make sure to get another nice dinner tomorrow. But still, thank you so much once again for that massive amount of support. And not only that, being one of our Australian viewers. I think it's midday for y'all right now, or early in the morning for y'all, one or the other. But I still gotta say, thank you so much for the massive support and helping this channel to keep running, because folks like you and everyone tonight who supported this channel in Super Chats makes it possible for us to keep this thing running. And I hate to say it, but sadly, I smited a bot a little late, so a lot of y'all actually got to see the bot, and they sat there and said something that I feel like all of y'all kind of just know at this point about the channel. They said, he's making money from your Super Chats! And it's like, well, yeah, it's like I kind of don't hide that. That's why y'all say for the pizza fund and for, a nice dinner and stuff. I mean, we do make a living off of this. Everybody makes a living off of it, funnily enough. Kind of odd, it's almost like it's a job. And, if people have a problem, and not to, give it too much airtime, but if people have a problem with me making a living covering the war and doing it for truly good intentions and running fundraisers and stuff, why do they not have a problem with, like, CNN and Fox constantly going out there and, using the war so that way they could get some good ratings and some good ad slots? Why in the world does no one have a problem with them doing it, but when a YouTube channel does it, and we're also, not trying to shill or anything, then it's a problem. That's crazy to me. Just crazy. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for the massive support, Duncan McIntosh, because it is folks like you who helped to make this channel possible. And moving on to our next one, it's from Old Warrior, who threw in a 50. Hey! And he said, will you address the bank issues with China and Turkey? And he spelled Turkey in the way they spell it these days, because back in the day, it used to be spelled turkey like the turkey bird, but now it's actually spelled Turkiye, and it also has the little accent marks above the U. Beyond that, it's still pronounced the same way. Still, with that in mind, sadly, I don't think I'd be able to talk about that in great depth, Old Warrior. I hate to say that, but sadly, I think that's something a little bit out of my expertise. I'm largely someone who looks at the strategic implications on the overall, and when I start to get into the economic weeds, I kind of lose where I am, and I'm not really able to talk about it too well because it wasn't really a massive area of focus. I can tell you, like, the basics. I can tell you if an economy is doing well or not, but I couldn't really tell you the exact situation of the banks, what they're doing, and if that's good or bad. And also, I haven't heard enough about it to be able to speak on it with a great deal of knowledge, to be comfortable to give you an answer, an explanation of what's going on. I can tell you, though, that the Chinese economy is quietly going through some massive issues. In fact, in case y'all didn't know, the last time, which was in July of last year, that the Chinese reported unemployment figures for citizens in between the ages of 18 to 35, the unemployment rate had reached a whopping 29%, and then they stopped reporting the figures. So we're assuming that the numbers are still that bad, and we'll be, keeping an eye on that and trying to see if things are still going that poorly. But beyond that, sadly, I don't think I'd be able to give you a good answer on the banks right now. I'll have to come back a little later, probably maybe tomorrow after I have a little bit of time to research it, and maybe I might have an answer for you then. But beyond that, old warrior, thank you for the incredible support and helping me to keep this channel running, because folks like you are helping me to keep the lights on, helping for me to make everything possible on this channel. If it wasn't for all of y'all who supported this channel day in and day out, I would not be able to do this as a full-time job and pretty much dedicate my entire life outside of law school to trying to provide the best news we possibly can. And so thank you so much for the incredible support, Old Warrior. And we are on to our final super chat of this segment, which does also, by the way, because there are still a lot of new viewers here tonight, and to all of those, I say welcome, and I hope y'all are having a great time here tonight. But also, on top of that, many people may be wondering, wait a minute, I threw in a super chat. Is it going to get addressed now? It will be addressed before the end of the stream, but during the middle of the stream, I take a little bit of a break from the news just to make sure that we address some of the support and also questions as well, and then we get right back into the news, and then after we cover the rest of the news, then we get into all the remaining super chats, and we also get into live chats straight out of the live chat. You do not have to pay to have a question answered on this channel. The only thing you have to pay for is nothing, literally. You can choose to support the channel or not. That is entirely up to you. But beyond that, everyone who has not had their super chat answered so far, your super chat will be answered before the night is rounded out. I always make it a policy on this channel to thank everyone graciously for your support, whether it be $1 or whether it be $500, which is the maximum amount a super chat can reach. I thank each and every one of y'all equally, because $1 for one person may be $500 for another. And the fact that y'all supported this channel at all means a great deal to me. And I thank y'all for putting enough stock into the channel that y'all find it worthwhile to crowdfund for it and help it to be possible. But moving on from that, quick little address on how super chats work, since we still have a lot of new people here. We have one from Mark, the Kinetic Possum, and he sent in a 100 New Zealand dollar super chat. Hey! Thank you so much once again. And Mark said, Britain should tax the rebellious colonies more. Oh, man. That's a good point. Why doesn't Britain just start taxing the Commonwealth? Why not? I'm sure nothing would go wrong. I'm just kidding. Everything would go wrong with that. But still, Mark, why not? That's a good question. Britain does have a lot of influence over the world still. I mean, London is the financial capital of really the entire world. Even in the modern day, it still beats out New York City by just a little. So, why not? Why not? Britain ought to get back into that kind of stuff, going around swaying a little bit of weight, maybe using the Royal Navy here and there. But hey, you gotta say, absolutely incredible. And thank you for the massive support, Mark, and helping this channel to be possible, because it's incredible to me to know that folks like you still enjoy this channel and support it, so that way I can make it possible and make sure that it's able to stay on air. And so thank you so much once again. And I know, y'all, that I said I was going to answer 3 questions from the chat and thank folks for the support, but, I have to make sure to address one more, because I'm sure many of y'all have seen it, and y'all wouldn't believe it. There are many people who have been considered channel legends in the history of this channel. Blue Flam 777, Butchie 777, Melody Francis, Bobby Carolfa, Average Joe, Seba, JD Mako 23, Margaret Hemsley, Grant Johnson, Alan Schultz, Certain Death, many. Dallas Borakua, I mean, there are loads of y'all. A lot of y'all are just in the live chat right now, and I'm just reading off some of the names that I know have been here for years. But there is one person who many of y'all knew and has returned tonight. We've seen little hints of him here and there, you know, throughout the past few months, but he's kind of been a little quiet, a little shy. But he's back in full. It's Jesus UCSB. And welcome back, Jesus UCSB. He said, welcome, and guess who's back? Guess who's back? Do, back again. Do. But still, welcome back, Jesus UCSB. It is great to have you back. And thank you so much for the support. I hope everyone gives Jesus UCSB a very warm welcome. For a while there, he actually went through some somewhat turbulent and difficult times, much like we have on this channel, from y'all know who. But beyond that, it's great to hear that Jesus UCSB has finally made a grand return to the channel, and thank you so much for being here with us tonight, and thank you, Jesus, for supporting the channel and backing the Lee Spring Army. We knew we could count on you. You are the Lee Spring Army tanker, and I'm glad to have you back tonight, and I thank you so much for making a boisterous and triumphant return. But with that, it is time for us to move back into the news and to make sure to cover the things, you know, cover the things that matter. The war. And there's been a lot going on in the war. Over the past 24 hours, many front lines have almost stayed completely stagnant. It always sounds a bit boring when I say that, and I always have to remind y'all, in a war like this, a defensive war, and we only saw one small movement right here by the Russian army. It appears that they maybe moved 100 to 200 meters forward. But over the course of this war, it is always important to remember that whenever the front lines are not moving, that is a good sign for Ukraine. If the front lines are moving anywhere eastwards, or they're staying completely still, that is a winning war for Ukraine. If they are moving westwards through Ukraine, that is not a good sign, and the Ukrainians are losing the war, or at least in that small instance. That is the way that this war is to be looked at. Ukraine is, after all, fighting a defensive war, and while they've been able to pull off incredible and completely, really logic-defying offensives like the one at Belarussian, the one in Kyiv, and also the one in Kherson, and reclaimed almost half of the territory that the Russians took at the beginning of the war, they are still fighting a defensive war. And as long as their nation survives and the Russians aren't taking more of it, that technically is still a winning war for Ukraine. Although many people have gotten spoiled from all of the incredible and upsetting victories that the Ukrainians have pulled off over 2 years. Beyond that, however, the front lines have not moved hardly an inch in this area. And it is certainly showing that the Ukrainians, for that matter, have been doing quite well in this area. Moving on into our first clip, we got to see that the Russians apparently are complaining about Ukrainians mining the roads. There are little groups of Ukrainian soldiers kind of roving around out there and, you know, just doing their thing. And apparently laying mines. Mine the gap.
Отбросило метров на 5 от места подрыва. То есть воронка где-то полметра глубиной. Рядом с ней стоит еще вторая мина ТМ-62. Напротив мины, в сторону посадки, натоптана тропа.
We see them still complaining about it and showing off the damage to the car and the mines on the road. Beyond that, however, it is very clear that the Russians are getting a little pissed about these Ukrainian groups that are just roaming around up there and laying down mines. These are groups that we have never even mentioned before on this channel because there's not really a lot said about them. But there are some Ukrainian Special Forces groups that end up infiltrating the Russian lines, hanging out behind the lines for weeks on end, setting up landmines on vital roads where the Russians never saw them before, so that way they can get a vehicle here and there that the Russians are using. Now that is something that is a major nuisance to the Russians, probably not causing incredibly high losses. I would actually say that FPV drones are still probably causing way higher losses than the mines ever could. But he is still causing a morale loss from the Russians because there are just Ukrainians roaming around wherever back there, just throwing down little mines and getting a car here and there. But moving on from that into our next clip, we also got to see another little clip from United 24 of those very cool Swedish Archer SPGs near the Luhansk area.
Is the Archer, the most automated self-propelled howitzer there is. It is one of 8 Archer systems delivered to Ukraine by Sweden, and it has finally arrived for the first real battle test in the harsh conditions of eastern Ukraine. For me, it's crazy to see this modern design on the roads of Donetsk region. This thing next to the Soviet tanks just freaks you out. Even the soldiers are like, what is this thing? But they're probably just jealous. They want to shoot from it.
Oh. I gotta tell y'all, the Archer is... Now, I will say this. I still think that the Caesar is one of the most effective wheeled SPGs out there. But the Archer takes the cake for being the coolest wheeled SPG out there on the battlefield right now in Ukraine. It is just so damn cool looking. I mean, it is truly the neatest, I have to say. And it's wonderful to know and wonderful to see an Archer SPG like this doing its job out there. And also, oh, what's going on here? Hold up. Someone told me there's a bot. I would have to go around smacking bots. Let's see here. I'm looking for it. Oh. This little clown, he's gone. I got him. Thank you so much, Heather, for pointing out that bot. I got the bot. It's gone. But the Archer SPG, I believe, is the coolest SPG out there in terms of looks. All the Caesar, the Archer, the M777, really every Western artillery piece that is 155mm in diameter, they all have literally the exact same range for the most part. The only thing that ekes out a little extra range from artillery piece to artillery piece is the kind of ammunition that's provided for them. But beyond that, a truly incredible system, and one worthy of praise, a true key, well, a true inspiration for the world to show what the Swedish military-industrial complex is capable of coming up with entirely on their own. But moving on from that little bit of news and down into our Crimean forest, we got to see that the Russians have tried to use their ingenuity, and the Ukrainians were apparently a little smarter. The Russians put a ATGM on a crane and lifted it up over the tree line, and the Ukrainians ended up destroying the crane-mounted ATGM. Here's the clip. There's the ATGM mounted onto a crane. I can't make this up. It's a real thing. Kind of wild, you know? And of course the Ukrainians are about to take this thing out. And we can see the little ATGM taken out right there. Pretty impressive stuff. And it's kind of funny, too. But that's all we have from the Crimean forest today. We didn't really see any frontline movements here either. It appears that the Ukrainian defensive is holding very strongly in this area, and the Russians are still not making any ground moving forward. Moving on down, however, and into our area of Bakhmut over the past 24 hours, we have seen this odd little occurrence here. It's almost like the Russians gained some ground and lost some ground at the same time. So, overall, it's a net neutral. The Ukrainians didn't really gain or lose any ground because they gained some ground and then lost some ground at the same time the Russians did as well. We don't really know a lot about what's going on in this area. Apparently, there's some kind of an ongoing smaller skirmish on this part of the line, but it's a quieter area that does not have a high troop concentration on either side. But meanwhile, in the major area of Bakhmut, we are starting to see some interesting developments, starting off with a clip of the 30th Brigade nearer to the northern side of Bakhmut. Here we can see some Russian soldiers. This guy's actually got pretty nice, well, you know, I can't really see it much, but it's a pretty okay looking AK-74. We can see his little comrade here wandering around with him. And if y'all think the Ukrainian defenders are doing a good job blowing up bunkers like that, put an LSA in the chat. Just to show the folks over there that we still back them up and think the Ukrainian armed forces are doing a great job. And with that, that's the end of that little clip right there. But we got to see that the 30th was able to do some pretty okay work against those Russians, and hopefully make sure to remind them that, once again, they're not where they're supposed to be. Moving on from that little clip and into our next one, we also got to see a really cool picture. Oh, man, I like it. It's a Panzerhaubitze 2000 firing in the area of Bakhmut right now. Sadly, we didn't really get a lot more behind the picture. It's just a really neat looking picture of a Panzerhaubitze 2000 doing its job, and I hope that it was doing its job very effectively. And by the way, the chat has gone mental. Keep it up. I like to see it. Keep putting LSAs in there. Just put a couple of them in there, you know, maybe 3 of them. That would be good. Keep it up. I like to see it. But moving on from that, and out of this little picture of this Panzerhaubitze 2000, and moving almost to the very southern end of the Bakhmut battlefield, someone has made a return, y'all. And it's someone y'all know from long, long ago. Many of y'all know of the little autonomous republic of Chechnya. The capital is Grozny. Chechnya is a semi-autonomous republic within the Russian Federation, meaning that it appears to be a semi-independent nation, but it is, of course, an oblast like any other. The governor of this, or more so the president of the semi-autonomous republic, is Ramzan Kadyrov, and he's the little guy who has run the Chechen Kadyrovites for quite a long time. An incredibly long time, as a matter of fact. And, you know, he's a hero, and his son's a hero, and everyone in his family's a hero, although they have never seen real frontline fighting. And, funnily enough, it appears that the Kadyrovites are once again back in action, firing at nothing. Here's the clip. He's like, blow up that air over there. Well, you see them firing the RPGs. And then we just see them put in some random footage of some building. See how they're firing at nothing? See how that went straight to space? I mean, that RPG right there is catching up to the Apollo 11 right now on its way to the moon. So, wait a minute. Hang on, y'all. Just to make this quite clear. Notice how there's nothing down there? No building at all, Don? You notice that, Don? Well, watch this. They didn't just insert the stock footage of a building getting hit on the roof. From that angle? Listen, they must think people are truly idiots. Because look, pretty damn shallow angle right there. Because the arc on that is probably meaning that the RPG is traveling maybe 500 meters before it hits the ground. And they want us to believe that it somehow didn't hit the ground. It actually flew to a building that is out of view because it's so far away that it's just shrouded by the fog, I suppose. And then it blew up on the roof. Not on the wall, on the roof. Oh, look at that. And we can see they're taking care of business. And we can see them walking into the little Hesco wall building that they have here, because with victory comes goats. And we all know what happens then. But beyond that, this is just ridiculous. I mean, they want us to believe that they're firing at a building. There was no return fire, of course. We never actually saw the building. At least in their footage. We just saw it from some kind of a drone and then saw an explosion on the roof. This all seems like a lot of bogus to me, but, you know, don't take my word for it. Take the Chechens' word for it, the Don, because they're always truthful, the Don. But, instead of that, we're going to be moving on out of that area and down towards the area of Avdiivka. Because there's been a lot going on down here in Avdiivka. Of course, the battlefield is one of the most active right now in Ukraine. But over the past 24 hours, of course, as per usual, there has not really been a lot of changes. It appears the Deep State UA has updated the map down here, but the Russians only moved forward about 50 meters. Not a major ordeal. And it appears that the Ukrainian defense is holding strong. The most important parts to note about the defense of Avdiivka are its flanks near Stepove and also down here near Vodine. As long as these are not moving, things are going incredibly well for the Ukrainian defense. If those begin to move, things are going quite poorly. But moving on into our bits of news and clips that we have around Avdiivka, our first one shows an abandoned T-72B3 being destroyed. Of course, by the Korn group. But anyways, we can see our T-72B3 right there abandoned, and we can see our FPV drone coming in from the right side. Any second now, we'll see it coming back in. Here we go. Hitting right onto the side of the turret. There it is, coming in from the right side, hitting the tank and immediately detonating the ammo. Not an impressive turret toss, but we could see that the explosion was strong enough to uproot the turret and its basket out of the tank. Very successful, very nice, and of course, beautiful. Moving on from that little bit of news of the Korn group destroying a T-72, we also got to see a Bradley again in action at Stepove. Also, really quickly, what's that right there? That's a T-72 something. I think that may be a knocked out Bradley right there. But, you know, you win some, you lose some. The Bradleys are still putting in work here, though. We see a Bradley here with its broad armor add-ons moving around through Stepove and doing its thing. Man, it's just crazy, y'all, to actually see an American armored personnel carrier, an infantry fighting vehicle like this, in actual combat action in a place like Ukraine, doing what it was meant to do, quashing the Russian army, and it's doing a damn good job at it. That was all of the footage that we got of this Bradley doing its thing, but still, wonderful news, and wonderful to see the 47th Brigade is really leaning heavily on those Bradleys. Apparently they're an amazing APC and something that the Ukrainians swear by as far as this area of the front line goes. We also got to see that there were some Leopard 2s, most likely attached to the 47th Brigade, both of them showing clear signs of battle damage, which is something I think the Germans can be very proud of. By the way, this also came from a German news organization. I'll be showing y'all this clip here, but sadly I'm going to have to be muting the audio. Stranded in a forest, these German Leopard 2 tanks are awaiting to be rescued. The traces of war cannot be overlooked. We can see damage down the length of their barrels. The cannon is riddled with shrapnel. The wheels completely worn out. Commander Roman and his crew have come under fire at the front. As you can see, the 120mm shell hit the back here and hit the cooling system. And we can actually see just a little dent on the roof of the engine bay where a 120mm shell, which mind you is the size of the shell that the Leopard 2 fires, just smacked right down onto the engine bay of this Leopard. And the Leopard actually was still able to crawl over the line after taking a direct hit to the engine bay. Now, that is something you would not see from a Russian main battle tank. That is not even an exaggeration. This is, honestly, even for a Western main battle tank, a pure miracle that the Leopard survived, and truly a feat to its engineering and quality. But we were able to reach it without any problems. The German armor really saved us, and the crew was not injured. But now the tank can only be repaired at the factory, but that's in Lithuania. And getting there is complicated. Roman and his crew now have to work the tank for transport, clean, and remove damaged parts. Then they'll have to wait for their Leopard 2 for a long time. Of course, it would be much better if we could repair everything here in Ukraine. That way we could do without all the paperwork for the border. If we had everything here, including some spare parts, we could save not just days, but even months. The damaged tanks here just show how necessary that would be. It is the first time that these journalists have been allowed to film such a service site, not far from the front. It is rare and honest look at the condition of the state-of-the-art German main battle tanks after months of combat. Ukraine has received more than 70 Leopard 2 tanks, but many of them are still operational. It's a big military secret. In this unit, there is only one tank out of 4. The other 3, like this one, have either been damaged in attacks or have technical problems. To keep their Leopard 2s operational, the Ukrainians themselves are not only allowed to carry out normal service work, change filters, and check the tracks. After all, the tools were supplied from Germany. We adjust the chain tension with enough experience, you can feel when it is strong enough. But despite the long downtimes for repairs, Roman really raves about this German MBT. Faster, longer range, better targeting systems. However, the 35-year-old commander still has suggestions for improvement. The armor could be even more effective and modern, and we need new defense systems because during the war, new anti-tank weapons were constantly being developed, and we simply have to reach that. The German Leopard 2 tanks may not have won the war, but Roman and the others here never want to sit in another tank again. Now, while this clip just kind of gives us an overview here, there is some somewhat concerning alarm bells being rung by this video. Considering that this specific unit that we're looking at here, and I'm assuming it's probably a battalion level unit, out of the 4 Leopard 2s they have, only one of them is still operational. That means that right now there's a 75% attrition rate, just going off of the single battalion, of Leopard 2 main battle tanks. That is largely not because the Leopard 2s suck, because if we notice in the film, They talk specifically about how these tanks are awaiting shipment out of country to Lithuania to undergo repairs at the repair stations there and then be sent back to Ukraine, which apparently is an incredibly long and incredibly laborious process compared to what we've been led to believe. This means that for now, I think the priority needs to shift on the German end and countries that have sent the Leopard 2s to Ukraine. It needs to shift from sending more Leopards to Ukraine to working out the logistical end. Rheinmetall and Krauss-Maffei-Wegmann, I believe, are already working on starting to move some of their factories into western Ukraine that can repair Leopard 2s, and that's going to fix the problem for a good bit. But at the same time, there needs to be more logistical operations, repair work, and such things like that being done inside of Ukraine itself, because the closer these repair stations are to the front lines and the more effective it is for Ukraine to get them there and back to the front within a matter of days, the more these Leopard 2s will be in operation, the more they can be levied against the Russians, and that'll improve the Ukrainian battlefield situation a huge deal. It is not good to have tanks sitting around like that, especially high-end ones like those, for months on end, because they have to wait to be sent hundreds of miles away through multiple countries to be repaired and then sent right back. But moving on from that, and into our last bit of news at Avdiivka, we also got to see a Ukrainian BTR-3 firing its Stugna at the Russians.
Смотри, чтобы нас охуенно видно не было.
We see them lining up their Stugna here,
Вот это он.
their little video game controller.
Огонь.
Ща.
Дальномер. Дальномер. Отбил.
Да.
Огонь.
Так. Раз, два, три.
Давай.
And they're firing.
Держи, 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 держи. Ровненько держи. Чуть выше. Выше, выше, выше веди.
And a dead-on hit.
Стой,
Стоп.
That's seeing that little clip, but a successful shot from that BTR, and certainly raising the crew's spirits. Moving on out of the Avdiivka battlefield, because the Ukrainian defensives are holding incredibly well, and it appears that the Ukrainians have done quite a good job over the video footage that we've been able to get on the past 24 hours of fighting. We're now moving all the way down, even past Marinka, which has been a fairly active battlefield, and towards the area of the village chain, Volodar, Pavlivka, and Yakarivka, as well as Novomikhailivka. This area has been mired with some consistent but still light fighting over the past few months, and we have seen that Ukrainian drones have continued to hit Russian forces in this area. I'm going to be muting the cool lo-fi hip-hop music. And here we can see two Russians get the best of it, from a drone attack, of course. We see more Russians getting hit by bomblets. We see him dropping another one. Dead on the nail. A very accurate hit. Drones have become one of the deadliest implements of the battlefield, almost as revolutionary as the machine gun was in the First World War, practically making any kind of a trench work obsolete because the precision of the drone bombers makes it to where the cover that a trench provides ceases to exist once a drone is directly overhead. It's more effective and deadly than even mortars, which were designed specifically around the time of the First World War to be able to lob their shells in almost a vertical trajectory and almost into a trench with somewhat reliable accuracy. The drone, however, is able to do it with almost 100% accuracy. A very concerning thing for the Russians, and certainly starting to change the way wars are being fought once again. And you see many such Russians not having a fun time with the new innovation of the drone. This guy here, he appears to be doing some aerobics. We now see the drone flying off after exhausting its bomblets, so that way another one could take its place. Here we can see the Russian soldiers hopping out of the back of their BMP and running into the woods. Little do they know, a predator lies in wait and crashes at the first sight. The Russians, now in disarray, have been abandoned by their mothership and are now left in the tree lines to fend for themselves. The Russians do cower in fear as the Ukrainian bomblets rain down like some gentle rain that cometh from heaven and ensures that many of the Russians take long, restful naps. You can see that the attacks continue against the Russians as the Ukrainian stomachs grow full on the meals they were able to capture today on the front lines. Many Russians are in absolute awe of this brand new technology and have not been able to understand the true implementation of its effects on the battlefield even after years of exposure. The Russians have not evolved. And that's the end of the clip. But very interesting to see that the Ukrainians are using their drone forces in the area to very high effect, or more so efficiency. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see the Ukrainian 72nd Brigade was able to find the Russians digging some holes, which you could kind of say poetically were pretty much their graves. But here's the clip. Well, you see the symbol of the 72nd Brigade of the Ukrainian Army. And Ryan Peacock said, I think it's long overdue for the marmot. And yes, I do agree. It's going to be marmot time here in a moment after this video. Here we can see our Russians digging holes. And we're about to see this Ukrainian drone helps them to ensure that it becomes their grave. Oh my lord. I think that drone just hit the fuel tank on that thing because it erupted pretty violently. And it looks like they put the orc no symbol, so I think that one's done for, and I don't think they're going to be digging their graves any further. Well, that drone just came in right then and there, like, oh, hello there, would you like a plum? It's marmot time, baby. But still, I had to throw that in because Ryan Peacock was like, it's marmot time, isn't it? And yeah, it's marmot time, right? Oh, hello there, would you like some plums? And by the way, y'all, I know that we actually do not have an active merch store at the moment, but the Lee Spring Army Honey Badger and the Marmot have become such a thing. I want to make sure that we actually start to put out patches for the Lee Spring Army. And also, I think I finally have in my head a finalized flag design for the Lee Spring Army. And it may be different country to country, but we're going to roll out the American one first, and then we'll be rolling out the next few based off of how many viewers are from each nation. So it'll go by priority. The Americans will be first. I believe the Canadians will be second, or it'll be the British. I think the British are actually second, and then the Canadians will be third. The Germans will be fourth, and the Australians will be fifth. But we'll be coming up with individual LSA flags for each country. Still kind of in the works on that, but the Marmot will probably become the emblem, not the flag, but it'll become the patch for the Canadian division of the Lee Spring Army. But with that, we are now going to be moving on from the little marmot because, you know, it's enough marmot time. And we're going to be moving on into our next clip near Pivlivka, where we got to see that the 68th Brigade was able to spot one of their wounded soldiers and get him out of the area. I'm going to have to be muting the music, sadly. And we see right there a wounded Ukrainian soldier. And we see them getting him a care package ready. so that way they can drop it on top of them. And there it goes. See, the Ukrainian soldier got it. He put a thumbs up. It's got a little bit of T in it, and it's also got a little bit of an instruction saying, don't worry, help is on the way. And Teslin said, Aussies don't donate, do they? Sadly, no. The Australians and the New Zealanders can donate to YouTube Give fundraisers due to laws within their nations not allowing it. Americans, Europeans, Brits, and I think some other select countries can support the YouTube Give fundraisers we run, but sadly, Australia and New Zealand are not those countries. But we can see the Ukrainians here found their soldier and are now evacuating him off the field. And you know he was very lucky to have been found. And so, that's the end of the clip, but a huge shout out to the 68th Brigade not leaving a single one of their soldiers behind on the field. Moving on from that into the area of Huilopol, we also got to see the Ukrainians rotating some personnel out there on the field with the help of one of their M113s, provided graciously by so many foreign nations, such as the United States, the Netherlands, Germany, and many others. Oh, look, it's a bot. Boom. I got him. That's the third bot I've gotten rid of tonight. I'm actually getting a little bit good at smacking down these bots. We can see the M113 open up its rear loading door. We can see the troops running out and taking position, and we can see the ones that were in the trench getting out of the trench and now getting in the M113, a perfect crew rotation. That appears to actually be a YPR 765. And Margaret, you're right, because you are an Australian viewer, and I guess y'all could support if you have a VPN. But I know y'all can support the channel with Super Chats, but at least without a VPN, I don't think y'all can support the fundraisers. For some reason, the laws won't allow it in Australia and New Zealand, and I think that's just bizarre. But we can see the rear loading gate flipping up. We can see the Ukrainians going and taking their positions. A perfect rotation. And with that, we're now moving on from that little clip in the area, just showing, you know, the normal daily life of the Ukrainian armed forces. And we're now moving on down into a somewhat active area today, the left bank of the Dnipro. A quieter area of the front, but still probably one of the most unique as far as its battlefield environment and also its location, being only on the other side of a river, the major river straddling all the, well, pretty much splitting Ukraine into two. Crimean is the city that the Ukrainians have been holding for several months at this point. We've seen that the Russians have used an exorbitant amount of artillery to try and uproot them from those positions and push them out. This is what Crimean looked like during, I believe it was October of 2023. And hopefully I'm correct in that. But beyond that, this is what Crimean looked like in October of 2023. The next picture I'm about to show y'all comes from today and shows y'all what Crimean looks like now after the Russians have been bombarding it mercilessly with artillery, trying to force the Ukrainian attackers out of the city. That's what it looks like today, the same area. You can actually see the small little forest right over here in the picture. It's bare now, but you can see that every single building has literally ceased to exist. There isn't even hardly a foundation left for many of them, and the village has been reduced to literally a flat plain. Not even rubble exists anymore in this area. Nevertheless, the Ukrainians still hold Crimean and are also pushing into the forest on the left side of the picture here, but showing how serious the battle has been for Crimean and how, while it's a quieter battlefield, it is still a heavily fought over battlefield. Moving on from that little bit of news and into Chelberta, we also get to see that the Ukrainians were able to destroy a Mista S on the left bank. I don't know if this footage is from today, but it's the first time we've seen it. We can see the Mista S firing here and there. And Clowndish123 said you can donate directly to the Ukrainian army via their website. And that's true. And you can also donate to United 24, and we have that option in our link. We have a link to United 24 in the description below for any viewers who want to support Ukraine but may not be able to do it through our fundraisers. You can always go click on that link, and you'll be sent straight to United 24, where you can support the Ukrainian government directly. But we can see that Mr. S getting hit and immediately brewing up the ammo, wildly volatile, and not only that, an incredibly large amount of it's inside of that SPG. but wonderful to see, and great to know that the Ukrainians were able to knock out another one. Meanwhile, the Russians have been taking out their wrath against the citizenry of the city of Kherson, directly on the other side, and not an active battlefield. The battlefield for the Russians have actually moved into the area of Dachi. The Ukrainians still hold and control Dachi at this very moment, but the Russians have decided that's not good enough to actually attack the Ukrainian army. They need to attack the Ukrainian citizenry. And so, the Russians began to shell Kherson again today. And we can see Ukrainian first responders coming to the scene and trying to stop the flames that are now roaring from the artillery fire. That's the end of the clip, but nice to see the Ukrainian first responders, come back and everything, and also make sure to take care of things. Now, really quickly, it appears that I made a misstatement, and it also appears that someone is taking great offense from this statement. Apparently, I was a little bit misnomed to say that New Zealand cannot support fundraisers, because one viewer is letting me know incredibly well that apparently New Zealanders can, and also apparently it's great offense to them that there was a misstatement. I'm terribly sorry that I cannot remember that your country can support fundraisers. We always thank everyone for their support, and since last Sunday, I thank every viewer individually, so I'd feel like I would have remembered something like that, but apparently it must have slipped my memory. Beyond that, however, I do thank you for letting me know, but it's not like I'm trying to shun all of the New Zealanders who support the fundraiser, because apparently you're taking it that way, and that's not the way it's meant. So, don't know why all of the defensiveness there, but nevertheless, thank you for letting me know. But moving on from that news and up back into Ukraine, it is time for us to get on out of the area of the... Well, actually not out of the area of the left bank. I haven't given you all the frontline analysis yet. It is quite interesting to note that the Ukrainians do hold Crimean. We do not know about Kazachi-Lahari, but they have started to move the fight further into the Aleski forests just south of Crimean. We believe that maybe because the city has literally been leveled at this point, and I'm hoping that the Ukrainians are able to continue pushing forward. They are going up against an entire VDV division that we still believe is based out of Korsunka, and also another Russian brigade out of Kazachi-Lahari, so it might be a little bit of a difficult fight, but I have a lot of faith in the Ukrainian Marines. They've done an incredibly good job, and with groups supporting them like Magyar's Birds, I'm sure that they are doing incredibly good work. But with that, it is time for us to move on out of the Crimean area and on up into the area of Kyiv, because it is that time of the night. It's time for us to get to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And he has the audio track today, so let me switch that out to Ukrainian. And here we go.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці і українки. Коротко про цей день. Дуже позитивна, реально надихаюча розмова з президентом Франції Макроном. Подякував за створення артилерійської коаліції в рамках нашого оборонного формату «Рамштайн» та за готовність Франції поставити Україні саме цього року десятки цезарів, дуже результативних систем артилерії та снарядів до них. Також будемо і надалі посилювати нашу ППО. Дякую, Франція, за сильні рішення. Звичайно, сьогодні обговорили ситуацію на полі бою в Україні. Деталі зараз, перспективи, відповідно те, що важливо включити в новий оборонний пакет, який Франція зараз готує. І окрім усього, обговорили роботу з Францією щодо безпекових гарантій для України. Ми готуємо двосторонню угоду. Еммануеля, пане президенте, ще раз дякую. Продовжуємо нашу комунікацію з партнерами щодо санкцій проти Росії, їхньої повної дії. Усі наші дипломатичні представники мають активізуватися, щоб і партнери реагували активніше на кожен випадок обходу санкцій з боку Росії. Це не просто абстрактне питання, це про те, як держава-терорист виробляє зброю, зокрема ракети. У всіх російських ракетах є десятки критично важливих компонентів, вироблених за кордоном, і багато з них компаніями з вільного світу. Сьогодні була відповідна доповідь керівника служби зовнішньої розвідки України Олександра Литвиненка. Чіткі факти. Тож блокувати шляхи обходу Росії санкцій – це буквально блокувати терор. Я вдячний усім партнерам, які це розуміють, та кожному в світі, хто допомагає нам в відповідній роботі. Провів сьогодні нараду з головою нашого уряду Денисом Шмигалем. Перше – це енергетика, захист спроможності нашої енергосистеми. Споживання зараз велике, загрози з боку ворога надзвичайно серйозні, але професійна робота і наших енергетиків, і усіх, хто відповідає за захист енергооб'єктів, дозволяє забезпечувати країну світлом і теплом. І це вагомо. Також сьогодні була окрема доповідь про захист стратегічних енергооб'єктів. Доповідав віце-прем'єр Олександр Кубраков. Прем'єр-міністр доповідав сьогодні ж щодо ситуації у нашій фінансовій системі. Ситуація стабільна, соціальні виплати забезпечуються у повному обсязі, ну і при цьому без емісії. І, до речі, я хочу подякувати усім нашим платникам податків в державі, кожному і кожній, хто в Україні підтримує робочі місця, забезпечує виробництво, працює легально і чисто. За минулий рік ми маємо, попри війну, і економічне зростання 5% і збільшення сплати податків, яке відповідає зростанню в економіці. Це чітка ознака сили України. І держава дійсно цінує усіх, хто у цей час, попри всі складнощі, працює, сплачує податки, підтримує таким чином нашу можливість, спільну можливість захищати державу і незалежність. Окрема доповідь голови уряду щодо будівництва фортифікацій. Триває робота, і усім, хто залучений, моя вдячність. Результати такі, яких потребуємо. Слава усім, хто захищає нашу державу, хто заради України б'ється та працює, хто активний максимально, щоб в Україні, українських компаній, українців був потрібний результат. Слава Україні!
And Ram Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 694 of the war. And that also is moving us on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to all of y'all about all kinds of fun things. We get to talk to y'all about y'all's leading questions. I get to thank everyone who supported the channel tonight and made it possible for us to be on air. I get to thank everyone for being here. I get to answer live chat questions. I get to do many things. And not only that, I get to talk to y'all about something that Zelensky was kind of talking about right there in his speech. About Ukraine's support. A lot of y'all were talking about it. Seems that he was a lot happier and more focused tonight since his talk with President Macron of France. And loads of y'all have had a lot of input on a question that I've had up for nearly an hour at this point. Do y'all think the support for Ukraine is going to increase over time or decrease over time? Of course, the past few months have been a little turbulent on support for Ukraine, especially in some of the larger nations. But nevertheless, it seems a lot of y'all have a very optimistic outlook on what this future for Ukraine is going to look like, foreign support-wise. Over half of y'all said that the support will in fact increase soon and probably will be able to ensure that Ukraine can keep going until the war is won. About a quarter of y'all said that y'all think it might depend on the actions taken by some nations, and a very small amount, around 17%, believe that the support will begin to dwindle as time goes by. But it seems as though the general idea in the public is that support will continue and in fact increase as time goes on. And what we're going through right now is nothing more than a small hiccup or a road bump in the support for Ukraine, which I would have to largely agree with. I think that is probably a good read on the situation. But with that, I hope that does address that quite well. And with that, we are going to be moving on into the Super Chats. Now, really quickly, everyone, I have to let y'all know something. I'm sorry if I sound a little winded tonight, because I think I may have overdosed on caffeine, and I'm going through some very wicked side effects because of that. So very sorry if I'm sounding a little bit detached and a little winded, because I have been going through heart palpitations and all kinds of things the whole stream, because of how much coffee I drank. Still, I'm alive, and it is alright. No one's dying yet, so just wanted y'all to know that, just in case y'all are like, he seems a little off. That's why I'm overdosing on caffeine as we speak. But moving on from that, and on into the Super Chats. We do have quite many interesting ones to cover. We're going to be moving on into, let's see here, Let me make sure I get them all correct in order, in proper sequence and order. Let's see here. Our first one goes to the incredible, Right Honorable Walter A. Lakota Jr., who threw in a 50. Hey! Thank you so much for the support. And he said, hello all the enforcer Matt. Rest in peace. And let's say, from OG Ellison Boson. Houthis are affecting the economy of Europe and shipping in general. Egypt is losing almost $3 million per ship in the Suez Canal, and it's driving up shipping rates in general. And yes, that is quite true. And I would agree with you completely on that, Walter A. Lakota, and that's why our response has been so strong and so fervent as time has gone by. It's something that the United States does not take lightly, and many people out there, I have to tell you, the hippies, modern-day hippies, really throw me for a loop. Because, you see, there are innocent people, unarmed innocent people, running those ships that are passing through the area of the southern Red Sea. The Houthis are attacking these ships, and some of these ships have ended up getting damaged, and some of them have ended up getting wounded on board because of these attacks. And then the hippies go, oh, look at America. They're going to start bombing innocent people that are doing literally nothing because, you know, it's affecting global trade. And it's like, yeah, honestly, that is the entire reason. Like, if you can't wrap your head around it, the reason why you're able to get your latte in your Starbucks cup is because there's a ship right now traveling around the world with all those printout Starbucks cups on it to get here to America. That's why you have the Starbucks cup that you're sitting there sipping on while you're talking. All right, that's why. So global trade is a big deal for America. That I can agree 100% with Walter A. Lakota, and it is having a pretty decent economic effect. Going off of that, I think that the U.S. response is still pretty light. I mean, I've got to applaud the response we've had so far. I think it is getting on up there to appropriate. But at the same time, it's, you know, it's silly to me to hear people sit there and go, oh, what is America doing? It's like, what do you think? We're protecting our strategic interests, you know? Like, just because we go to war or we have to go and deal with some people, you know, it doesn't mean that every single time it has to be a defensive war and there has to be real lives at stake. Sometimes it just has to be the economy's at stake in some way, and things are, you know, not going too well in that regard. Then you bring out the damn military. People, I don't think people get that. I don't think people will ever get that. War is a necessity. War is an extension of governance. It really is. I mean, there is never going to be a time in world history where it is devoid of war. I hate to tell everyone that because war is a terrible thing. But at the same time, while it's terrible, it's important to accept the reality that it is a tool of governance and it is a tool and an extension of diplomacy. And it's when diplomacy inevitably fails. And for that reason, I don't condemn anything at all that America's doing. It's completely justified. And in fact, America's really picking up the tab for everyone, funnily enough, including the Russians themselves. Because Russian vessels have been attacked and the Russians have done nothing in response. And we've ended up bombing the Houthis pretty much on the Russians' behalf as well. So going off of that, I would have to say for the most part, I would say it is certainly affecting shipping rates. It's affecting the European economy. It could, in the end, affect the American economy to a small degree, and we have to make sure to protect Western interest and keep things going well. And also, I saw Siri say, "Don't throw a certain group under the bus." And I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. But what I am throwing under the bus are the people who always act like every single armed intervention or armed action the U.S. takes is absurd. A lot of the armed action we take has some pretty good cause behind it, except for a handful. And I think Vietnam is one of the few that I can think of, although it really wasn't that bad of a reason. You know, it's trying to stop the spread of communism. It worked in Korea a pretty good deal. I mean, hell, there's still a country that exists because of our armed intervention to stop the spread of communism there. So, you know, using the same logic in Vietnam, I mean, that's not that far of a logical jump to make to say, well, yeah, I kind of get it. You know, it's got a strategic implication behind it. But beyond that, with something like this, it has a big impact like that. And it certainly is something that we have to look out for because, if Iran is able to leverage this terrorist group the way they are to damage the Western economy in the somewhat minor way they are, that could end up snowballing. And if they're able to do that in multiple categories, it could become a major impact to European economies. That's why we have to make sure to do what we're doing. And I completely back it up 100%. And I got to thank you so much for the support, Walter E. Lakota, and helping this channel to keep running. Because folks like you have made it possible day in and day out, day by day, hour by hour. And if it wasn't for folks like you, I wouldn't be able to be here on air right now. Now, really quickly, before I move on to the next one, I swore that there was several $50 Super Chats. Now, I think I've addressed 2 tonight. And I was absolutely correct. There are many others. And so I had to go pull up my second sheet. Because so many of y'all threw them in, and it's not showing up on my spreadsheet here in the YouTube control room. It's glitching. So let me make sure to flip over here real quick, because we are on to our next one, which, oh my goodness. Let's see here. Let's see, Riots Erupt. That is not today's stream. It's this one. So, our next super chat comes from Snow White Sig Int. And Snow White is a true channel legend and an amazing supporter of the channel. I gotta thank you so much once again for the amazing support. Snow White said, I was on a date a few weeks ago and had to wrap it up to be home for the stream. When I said I need to make it in time for the Morse code message, this guy looked at me like I was crazy AF. Cheers only. Y'all, the LSA, know what I mean. And thank you so much for the massive support, Snow White. And I gotta say, I love to hear that you cut a date short to get here and listen to the Morse code. You're like, listen, you're great and all, but I gotta go listen to the Morse code. And he's like, what the hell? I gotta respect that. Thank you so much for putting the LSA on up there. But hey, make sure to take care of yourself in that regard. It's always important to be able to get yourself in a good relationship with a caring person, you know, not just anyone, but a caring person, because it really means a lot and really helps out on the mental side of things. But beyond that, I love to hear that the LSA means such a big thing to you, and the channel does, that you would end up throwing a date to the side, just be like, all right, see you around. It's time for the show. Because that is actually pretty funny to me, and I gotta applaud that. Thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Snow White. Because folks like you have made it possible for such a long time, and it means a great deal to me that folks like you not only have been here for a while, but help to continue to support the channel, so that way I can make sure that its continuance is possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And I'm gonna be honest with you, Snow White, that would be my worst nightmare if I went on a date with someone. They're like, yep, I gotta go, my show's coming on. I'd be like, what do you mean? It's like, that honestly would be like that. So I kind of sympathize for the poor fellow that you did that to, but still, mad respect. I thank you for coming here and watching the show tonight. That means, well, a few weeks ago. That's really cool, and I thank you for that. But moving on from that and into our next super chat, the next one is from Rick Clay, who put in a 50, and he said, Enforcer, you need to reconnect on Discord or Signal. Have info, intel, videos to share. And thank you so much for the support, Rick. And thank you for wanting us to get back onto a Discord. However, I don't think we'll ever have a real running Discord server again. Discord servers ended up being nothing but another extension of stress for me, and it wasn't really because of viewers, it was because of the moderators that always ended up for some reason getting picked. People who want to be in positions of moderator don't always have the best intentions for the Lee Spring Army or the channel in mind. They honestly are doing it as a power grab. A lot of them are, but we still have some real ones. Like Mace LSA, who was one of our moderators during the second schism. He's a real one, and he's still here with us right now. Huge, just admirer of folks like that who actually put the channel above, you know, like selfish power grabs. That's incredible. But I don't think we'll ever really have a Discord back. However, if you want to share stuff like that with me, Twitter is the best place to reach out. I've been checking the Twitter daily and also reposting big news on our Twitter, so make sure to go check that out. Link in the description below, because you can message us directly right over there, and it removes the whole thing of me having to have a Discord server and have mods that are, you know, trying to make power plays. Because I apparently found out, you know, just to give you all a little bit of a backstory about the second schism, I sat there and said at one point, wait, and y'all gotta remember, this is way back at the beginning of 2023. So this is almost over a year ago at this point. I I said to my moderators, and I was like, yo, running this Discord server is really stressful because I'm having to get involved in a lot of decision making outside of the channel and everything else that already takes a lot of decision making. That's kind of stressful. So a week later, these mods give me a call, the ones that I had in charge, and they go, hey, we have made a brand new Discord server for the Lee Spring Army that we are going to run called the LSA Barracks, I think it was. And I was like, okay. I was like, that's a little weird. And they said, oh, we promise you. We would never do anything to try and, usurp the channel or cause, like, any kind of tension or anything. And remember that statement, because about 2.5 months, 3 months later, Mace LSA, and I got to give them a huge shout out to this, and also a couple of other moderators as well, which I won't disclose their names because I don't think they really wanted them to be. They came up to me and said, hey, like one of those moderators, one of the two, really one of the three, that were heavily involved in making that new server. I said, yeah, well, they're telling people that the channel, that the Lee Spring Army isn't even your community, it's their community, and it's just a random community on the internet, and they're telling people that you're not a great person, you're a terrible person, and just spreading lies and stuff. And I said, really? And so then that's when I ended up talking to them, and I started to get the indication, like they had said, that they weren't necessarily big fans of the channel anymore, and we're trying to do power plays and behind the scenes because, like the first moderator group, they wanted to start to decide what they wanted on air and not wanted on air, and if they didn't like it, well, they were going to try and rip the channel down in the meantime. So somehow, some way, I don't know why, they ended up giving over control and ownership of that Discord server to me, and I ended up immediately deleting that one and the old one that we had as well. And at that point, I said, you know what? I'm done with Discord servers. I'm just never doing them again. They're way too much trouble. And on top of that, after that point, then one moderator wanted to start telling me things that I kind of would like to know is happening in my Discord servers, because I told them with the new Discord server, I was like, oh, well, thank y'all for doing that. And I was like, that's still weird. And I said, if y'all, want to take care of things yourselves, that's fine, because y'all seem to do pretty okay on that. But at the same time, if anything serious, really serious happens, let me know so that I can make sure to keep apprised of things and keep on top of it, so that way if something necessarily not good is happening, I know it's happening. So then after I deleted the Discord server, one of the mods wanted to tell me, oh, by the way, there was an old man in the server trying to groom kids. And then I went, why the hell would you not tell me that? Like, that's one of the things I would want you to tell me about if it was happening, so that way I knew what was happening, and you didn't tell me. And when I heard that, and I was like, that is, if that was something, because one, the kind of like the situation with the Chinese balloons, everyone just decided that was something I just did not need to know, although that's a very important thing that you probably would need to know. And also, really quickly, who the hell is this? Hang on, let me go around and look at this real quick, because I saw someone say something a little odd in the live chat. Oh, wait a minute, there it was. Okay, so we keep an eye on that. But, when I heard that, I was like, I'm not going to have a Discord server around that, one, I'm not able to be in charge of and moderate, because I can't trust moderators to tell me when stuff like that's happening, because apparently, oddly enough, how the story went from what I was told after I deleted the server, apparently the guy was pretty much given, like, probation for this serious, heinous offense on the server. I would have banned the guy immediately. But instead, they went, hey, bad, tap on the wrist, don't do that again. And y'all can kind of get what happened, because the guy apparently ended up getting banned. And I was like, the hell, why wouldn't y'all tell me that? And one, why were y'all so lax on the guy? That pissed me off to no end. And that was another reason why I was like, if I can't have a direct oversight on something and make sure that it is being run correctly, we simply are not doing it. And that's why I won't do a Discord server, because it's not just about, the potential of having power-hungry mods trying to create drama and tear down the channel. It's also the fact that, and let me go back up there, because thank you for pointing that out, that's what I thought. But it's also about the fact that I don't know what the hell moderators are going to let slide, and that can end up coming back and being a bad look on this channel for something that I had no clue about until long after it was over, because from what I also was told, that happened a month before I even deleted the Discord server, and I was like, why the hell would no one ever not let me know that that happened? That's something I would like to know happened, because that's pretty damn serious. But beyond that, that's why. But I do thank you for the massive support, Rick Clay, and helping the channel to keep on running. And I didn't mean to go on that long rant, but maybe letting you know a little bit about our behind-the-scenes drama with at least the second Discord service before the second Great Schism happened, and why I'm never really going to have another one. And there was also other things. That was probably the most glaring one, because I was like, that's probably the most serious one I can think of. But there were many other things that they brought up that they went, we took care of them without letting you know. Wasn't that great? And I was like, no, because those were the things I wanted you to let me know were happening. You know, not keep me in the dark on everything. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, Rick Clay, and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you do make this thing possible. And moving on from that into our next one, we have a $50 super chat from MN Girl. I'm guessing that's Minnesota Girl. And MN Girl said, LSA, please join Enforcer's Patreon. Wasn't allowed to put actual name. After 2 years without a real break, we should all try to have his back if he's sick, needs to study, or just needs a damn vacation. Guaranteed income is a huge stress reliever. And I gotta thank you so much for giving a shout out to the Patreon, MN Girl. And thank you for wanting people to go there and support the channel and help this thing to keep running. Also, Joey, if you're wondering what happened, go to the very beginning of the stream. That was almost 2 hours ago when I started talking about that, but go back to the beginning because I talked about it at the very start of the stream. But beyond that, I gotta say thank you for plugging the Patreon. But one thing I do not want people to feel like they have to do is support the channel. I always want people to feel like that is a voluntary thing that folks can do if they want to or if they don't want to. That is a big thing to me. And I never want to go, hey, everyone, run over to the Patreon. Y'all got to support it. But I would thank y'all for supporting it. It does mean a lot to us that people enjoy the channel enough to support. And let me go over there really quickly and see what's going on up in our Patreon. No new members at the, well, wait a minute. Let's see. Oh, man. Aw, that's unfortunate. But anyways, beyond that, I do thank y'all for wanting to support the Patreon and giving a huge shout out to it, because it does help the channel to keep running, but guaranteed income would never stop my work ethic. Even if y'all just went entirely over to Patreon and there was never such thing as a super chat again, this thing would still run 6 days a week, because I just, you know, I always have a big deal of pride in knowing that we are able to run a very consistent stream and making sure that it's always live and always running on air. That's something that means a lot to me. Even like just to let y'all know, times have been a little tough on this channel lately, because when super chat support comes in lower numbers, after YouTube takes their cut, and you know, back when Matthew was on the channel and I also had to, you know, pay him on top of me, both of us would end up making less than minimum wage a good amount of the time for the amount of hours that we put into the channel. But even at that, I still really didn't have a lot of a determination to go, you know what, that's it. It was very stressful, yes, because we were starting to really get concerned that the channel might not be able to continue on much longer at that rate. It may be able to last a few more months before things just reach a critical mass and then we have to figure out something to do. But beyond that, I would, even with Patreon support or without Patreon support, we would always make sure to run this channel the way we have. 6 days a week, 10 p.m. Eastern time, every day but Monday, and getting that news out there for y'all. It means a lot to me that we're able to do that, and it's something greatly on. And so, with that, and let's see here. Joey, I already answered your question. You know, if you can't understand an answer, then you might have to find a new channel. But moving on from that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again, MN Girl, for the massive support in helping this channel to keep on running. You're helping to make this thing possible, and if it wasn't for folks like you, I wouldn't be able to be on air talking right now. And with that, we are on to the next one. We already addressed Walters, because Walters is the next in the list, but his was addressed first, because it was the only one that showed up in the viewer activity chart on the control room. But moving on from that, and let's see here. Let's see. Hang on, I'm just making sure I'm not missing anything in the live chat. Oh, you know what, Joey? Oh, goodness. Sorry, Joey. You're going to have to go. I hate to say it, because I've answered your question so many times, and if you can't get an answer, you know, that is what it is. But moving on from that, and into our next one, we are going to be let me make sure that we're starting off right, because right now I'm having to really make sure to cross all the I's and Q's and everything. And so moving on to the next one. This is from Christoph P, who threw in at 20. And he said, thank you for your hard work to keep us informed. And thank you for supporting the channel and enjoying the amount of work that I put in to make sure that y'all stay informed. I'm doing things that are probably not great for my health, like overdosing on caffeine and things, to make sure that we are able to keep this thing running. And sometimes it's tough, but it always makes it worthwhile that y'all support the channel and keep this thing running. That's what makes it all worthwhile to me in my head, is that y'all actually are always here and always enjoying it. And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Christoph, because if it wasn't for folks like you who really did enjoy that hard work and found it worthwhile to support, I wouldn't be able to do this as my full-time job and stay on air. And so thank you so much once again for the massive support, and I love your name. That is a really cool name. If I'm mispronouncing it, very sorry, but I love the name. That is a cool one. And with that, we are now moving on to the next one, which is a 20 from Robert Nicholson. He said, your efforts are impressive. Don't burn out. Hug a corgi later. And I got to thank you so much for the support, Robert Nicholson. And I will make sure to hug a corgi later. I love my corgis. And thank you so much for saying the efforts are impressive and supporting the channel and showing that in that way. And of course, really quickly, if you cannot support the channel, that's not the only way that you can show your appreciation for it. You can hit the like button. That is a great way to show your appreciation for the channel, and it doesn't cost a dime. All it costs is your finger tapping the like button on the screen. It's very, very easy, and it makes me really happy. It always makes me so happy to see that so many people hit the like button. But beyond that, I will not burn out. Robert, I can guarantee you this. I have gone through enough mental torture over the past 2 years running this thing, and that sounds really, really, really dramatic. To be honest with y'all, it's not mental torture. It's just stress to the point of breakdown. I have broken down, and I'll try and be as honest with y'all as possible, at least on my, like, personal side of things. I have had breakdowns to the point I just, you know, break down crying and just sit there and do nothing for hours, sometimes the whole day here and there, because everything just, you know, it all hits you like a truck, and you realize that there's just not enough time to even do everything, and it just freaks you out, and you just sit there and you stop and you break down. That is something that I've dealt with a lot. But one thing that never happens for me is burnout. I can get to that point, I can break down and then rebuild myself time and time and time and time again, just endlessly, constantly doing it over and over and over. And it's, you know, just what I have to do. It's a part of life. And, you know, and I can't imagine having it any other way at this point. And honestly, over time, I've gotten a lot better at managing the stress, because once you get used to a certain level, you're just really used to feeling a certain way, stress-wise. And that's something that I've just learned to get accustomed to. So I can promise you this. I will be stressed out all the time. I was stressed out today, heavily so, because there's just, like, you know, not to get y'all into everything of my personal life and details, but there is a lot going on in the background, multiple different things at this point, that just stress me to hell and back. And one of those things is actually having to run the channel solo. That is very stressful, because I'm doing everything on the earth, including running polls, responding to viewers in the live chat as best as I can, you know, keeping track of super chats, trying to keep track of live chats. All that is being done solo now. That's a great deal of stress, along with law school assignments, which are never ending, and just a multitude of other things that I'd rather, you know, keep off air. But beyond that, it is all very stressful, but I promise you I will not burn out. I say that every single time. I tell y'all about all the stresses I go through, so that way hopefully y'all know how much I actually care about this channel, because, you know, the fact, I hope that it's kind of shown, because this is why I say it so much. I hope that the fact that I go through so much stress and still continue on doing this shows y'all that I'm really determined to just keep this thing running no matter what happens and what it does. I'm not like other YouTubers where it's just kind of a casual thing where they just do it for fun, because, you know, that's just not how I do it. I mean, why, if I was doing that, why in the world do I also ask y'all to help me to keep the lights on? Because if I'm going to treat it like it's just some kind of a thing, it's like, how in the world, you know, in my mind, do I justify y'all enjoying it enough to support? That's a big thing to me as well, is that if y'all are going to support this channel and help me to make a living doing this, I feel like I owe y'all my damnedest efforts. And that's why I also put in a lot of effort and don't burn out. I just physically cannot burn out. But beyond that, thank you so much once again for the support, Robert, and thank you for the kind words as well. And with that, we are going to be moving on to the next one, which is from Activista, who threw in a 20. Hey, thank you so much for the support, Activista. And he didn't throw in a comment, but support does help out a great deal and help me to keep this thing running. And also, really quickly, someone said in the chat, it seems like a lot of people are talking about this now, trying to get some kind of anti-anxiety medicine. And that's something that I will not ever take. I'm honestly not a big fan of taking any kind of medicines. Like, you know, I'm not one of those people. I just want to make that clear. I'm not one of those people who think if you take a medicine like the demons steal your soul or whatever. I'm not like that. It's just that I don't ever like taking things that I don't necessarily have to take. And I think that things like anxiety and headaches and stress and pain are things that you kind of have to feel in life because your body is doing that stuff to let you know where you're at. What's the limit? And those kinds of things, pain and anxiety and stuff like that, lets you know how close to those limits you really are getting. And I feel like it's just stuff that has to be felt. Not only that, it's character development. Why be on medicine, like anxiety medicine, when you can actually feel how anxious you are and try and actually find ways to handle that and manage it. So that way, when you go forward in life, you're not reliant on medicine, but you're reliant on your inner strength of your own character. That's kind of how I look at it as well. It's a character building thing, you know? But beyond that, I hope that addresses that well, because interesting point. I thank you for coming up with a solution, but also at the same time, if I took anti-anxiety medicine, would I be me? That's kind of a big thing as well, because a lot of people say that when they take medicine like that, they kind of feel a little dead inside and stuff. And when I take medicine like that, would I be able to get on air and act the way I act? Or would I stop acting that way and would I just become bland and boring? That's something else that's a big question to me too. And so I have to suffer for y'all's enjoyment. I'm just kidding. I don't suffer for y'all's enjoyment. I have a lot of fun doing this. And I never want y'all to feel like I'm, some kind of going under some kind of a burden or, the narrator's going to start saying, "It is the 41st millennium. The Emperor of mankind has sat on his golden throne for the past 100 centuries." I don't want y'all to think that that's me, because that would be horrendous. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that quite well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is Jesus UCSBs, which we addressed earlier, but welcome back! And moving on from that one, we have, excuse me, talking nonstop will wear out your vocal cords. But we got a 20 from Doug, who said, "Here's 20 for the Marmot Party fun." Thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And thank you so much for putting in some Marmot Party fun stuff. I think I'm going to have to start taking a little bit of break from my voice because it is getting overworked at this point, running nonstop for 2 hours straight. But I'll have to be taking a little bit of break and getting a little bit rolled back so that way my voice can last into tomorrow. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Doug, and supporting that Marmot Party. Everyone loves a little Marmot Party. Moving on from that and into our next super chat, and making sure to start from the top and work the way down to the bottom. Roger Plummer. Let's see. Oh, my heavens. Let's see here. Whoops, I said Mac. Oh, yes, he's not here at the moment. Hopefully he'll be back. Hopefully you're planning on him to be back by next week. That's what I would be hoping at the moment. But, we can only hope, we can only pray. But moving on from that and into a next one. This one's a 10 from Roger Plummer. He said, "LSA, you rock, no question. Just want to say you rock. And thank you so much for saying I rock. And Afghanistan." You see what I did there? But still, thank you so much, Sir Plummer, for the support and enjoying the channel and saying I rock. It means a lot to me, and I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because you are helping me to stay on air and keep this channel running and make it possible. If it wasn't for folks like you, I wouldn't be able to be here right now for you to say that I rock. I would have simply ceased to be. And so, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that quite well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And moving on to that next one, it is a $10 super chat from Tracy D1233. And he said, Tracy said, "I appreciate all that you're doing for Ukraine." And I thank you so much for enjoying everything that we have done for Ukraine, Tracy. It's not just me, just the entire community, the hundreds of thousands of people who are a part of this boundless Leaf Spring army over countless a country, over a vast world, who continue to keep the Leaf Spring army running. Those are the people who truly make this possible and make this channel what it is, as special as it is, as unique as it is, as bold as it is. And I have to thank you so much for the support, Tracy, and giving a little bit of credit to me, but I believe the entirety of the credit goes to the Leaf Spring army at large. But thank you so much once again. And with that, we're on to the next one, which is once again from MN Girl, who threw in a 10 once more, and said, I ran out of words on the last one, although I made an exception this time, but I refuse to give 30%. Please open Buy Me a Coffee, so we have other options. And thank you so much for the support, MN Girl, and I'd have to say that there are other options. Patreon only takes 8%, which is one of the lowest percentages that you can find across the entirety of the internet. If you would like to support the channel and know that there is not a company out there just absolutely grabbing for the money, like YouTube is taking 30% of a super chat, the Patreon is probably the most likely substitute and the most likely option. Another big thing about this channel is that we always want the support options to be streamlined and very simple, so that way a viewer can know if something is a scam or not. Supporting the channel through Super Chats and Patreon are currently the only two ways that it is possible to support this channel. If you reach out to us on Twitter and ask for our PayPal, PayPal is dispensed per request, but we do not make our PayPal public information. That is something that must be asked for. You could also send support that way, if you would like that option, MN Girl. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support, and so much for wanting to help the channel to keep running and find a way to make sure that the most support gets to us behind the scenes, so that way we can keep this thing running. It means a lot to me that you have that kind of concern, and want to make sure that the longevity of this channel is ensured, at least on the viewer support end. It means a great deal to me, and I thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope I was able to address that as best as I possibly can. Moving on from that one, and on to our next one. We have one, it's a $10 Canadian super chat from Cheerful Tunic Gaming. And he said, hello Enforcer, Canadian here. What's your view on the Canadian military, especially considering NATO criticism of not meeting the 2% GDP? You being American, how do you feel about it? Keep up the great work. And I have to thank you so much for enjoying our work, and thank you for the kind words. And to answer your question, the Canadian Army, the Canadian military as a whole, is actually a very good one. It's up to speed, it's up to spec, and its training is quite well. That is the story, however, with many Western European nations, such as the United Kingdom, Germany, and France. But none of those countries are able to meet their 2% minimum GDP spending requirement. There's a bit of a misconception in the world about how NATO spending works. Many people believe that 2% quota is the amount of money that a nation pays into NATO itself, and many people believe that NATO is some kind of a separate organization from the rest of the nations that compose NATO, and there's some kind of a NATO army. That is untrue. There is no NATO army. That 2% GDP spending quota is actually a percentage quota based on how much each country is spending on their own national defense. The United States spends something around 2.7% of its GDP annually on its defense, which is actually quite low, but still over the mark. The Polish actually spend the highest. It's somewhere around 4%, a complete 100% over the NATO spending goal. In fact, at the moment, it is the highest across the entirety of the NATO alliance. Germany, however, does not spend that much. Germany spends around 1.3% of their GDP on their armed forces, deciding that their funds could be spent in better areas, mostly on infrastructure, education, and other kinds of civic infrastructure. However, I believe that it's not really a question of how good are these militaries, because in all honesty, all of them are incredibly good and honestly quite top-notch. It's, however, the question of how big is their military. And to be honest, the British, the French, the Germans, and the Canadians could all work a little bit harder on appropriating the proper amount of funding to surpass that 2% NATO spending quota and spend it on their own armed forces. It is not for the general prosperity of NATO, it's also for the general prosperity of each individual nation. And with that, I hope that does address that well, and I do thank you once again, Cheerful Tunic Gaming, for your support and helping this channel to keep running, because folks like you have helped to make it possible day in day, through and through, and if it wasn't for people like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And with that, we are moving on to our next bit of support, which is a 12 from Sisyphi. Sisyphi did not throw in any comments, but nevertheless, the support does allow me to continue to make comments on air, and I do thank you so much once again for the incredible support, Sisyphi, and making sure that this channel is able to continue its running. If it was not for folks like you, I would not be on air right now, and I greatly appreciate folks like you, absolute channel legends, who have backed up the Lee Spring Army and continued to allow its banner to advance unimpeded across the field. And thank you so much once again. And we're moving on to our next one, which is a $14 super chat from Miranda Nelson. Miranda said, I hope that amount doesn't make me out to be a pedo. And I don't know what 14, I don't know how that would work. To be entirely honest with you, I don't know how that would work, but I don't think you're one. So thank you for the support, helping the channel to keep running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to our next one, which is a $10 super chat from Jay Bagwell. He said, here's a loaded question. Oh, I see what you did there because I pre-read your super chat. What is your impressions soon of the LeMat revolver? Making it look easy. Walk with your boys. We make it look easy. Real trap shit. Damn, son, where'd you find this? But thank you so much for the kind words, Jay. And also, the LeMat revolver is just bizarre. You know, it's just one of those things where you go, what the hell? It's, so, to explain, it has 7 barrels. This thing was used by the Confederate States in the American Civil War. It was also used in other countries as well, but it's most famous in the American Civil War. Let me see if I can find y'all here a good explanation of how it works. So it has a revolving 6 cylinders, and I believe that's the 36 caliber rounds are in the cylinders, but then it also has this single barrel that is in the middle of the cylinder, mind you, that operates separately. And it fires off I think it's a, let me make sure again, a 42 caliber Minet ball, I believe. So, I haven't been able to shoot this thing, of course, but it is quite bizarre. Just really bizarre, I would have to be quite honest, and I don't really know what to think of it. It's one of those odd, unique designs, kind of like the G11 space gun that H&K makes, where it's just like indicative of its era. It was a time of experimentation in certain ways, and the LeMat is certainly a great example of that. And so, thank you so much for the support, Jay. I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion, because it certainly is a very odd little pistol, no doubt about it. But I hope that does address that well. And let me make sure to check this real quick. Just want to make sure that we're not missing anybody. And we ain't missing anybody, because welcome to James Dunn, who just became a 1 in the Lee Spring Army, at least on the Patreon. And so thank you so much for that. And let's see. Moving on from that, let me make sure to refresh my list here to make sure we're not missing anything. Okay, so there were a couple of more that came in. So moving on to our next one, and thank you once again, Jay, for that support. This one is from Ian Frogfish, who threw in 10 pounds and said, I'd like to sponsor a question from the chat. And that you may. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And your question is going to go, let's see here. Hopefully we get a live chat, because I'm looking through and I'm not seeing a lot here. I think this is the best one I can get so far, but we'll answer a second one if this isn't good enough, Ian. But 420 said, does Alabama have medical cannabis? And the answer is no. And also to clarify this really quickly, I, of course, do own guns. As you all know, we reviewed one of them on this channel, and you also know I have that Tommy gun. And I have some others. But a big thing is that while on a state-to-state basis, narcotics such as marijuana can be legal, on the federal level, it is still illegal. The federal government has not legalized the possession or use of substances like those. And to be a gun owner, you cannot possess or use those kinds of substances, even if it is legal in your state, because, you know, federal law does take precedent over state law. And on top of that, the purchase of firearms is a solely federal matter. That's why the form, I believe it's Form 4473, is a federal form, I believe issued, and I think we have some viewers that could help me out with this if I'm not correct, and I won't say their name, but I know they have a lot of experience in this field. The Form 4473 is a ATF thing and run by the federal government. That's also why you go through a federal background check to be able to see that you are able to purchase a gun. Also, that is a state background check as well, but it still goes through a federal background check on top of that. That means that even if you live in a state like Minnesota, where you can have marijuana and you also own a gun, technically, you are committing, I believe it would be a federal felony, because the federal government does not allow you to own or purchase guns while being a user of any kind of controlled substances at all. And that means that just me owning guns, I would never take the chance of doing anything like that because, you know, who knows, that could become a very serious issue. And I believe it is a felony. I would have to go back and look at the proper statutes that pertain to that to make sure that I am correct, because I would not want to run into trouble with the federal government. The federal government is unforgiving and very cruel when it comes to the continuance of justice is the best way to put it. And when I say cruel, I mean they actually just follow the law to the letter. State courts don't necessarily do that completely, but the federal court, they follow things to the T. So I would not want to get in any trouble with them. So even if that was an option, I would not do that. And on top of that, back in the day, just to let y'all know, about a year and a half ago when I was running this channel, and, you know, people were like, oh, you know, people, you know, they smoke weed and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, you know, that's their thing. Let them do their thing. And then we ended up being badgered to death by some hellspawn who does nothing but smoke weed in their free time, and just associating the two things and trying to draw a correlation there. I'm not a big fan of trying to use any kind of marijuana at all. Even if I felt like I could, I wouldn't, because it seems to me like it's, at least in that one instance, like just the continuance of being a loser and having nothing going for you is to just sit around and smoke weed all day. Not saying that anyone who does that here on the channel is. I'm just saying that's what that one person does, and that's been burned into my head now. And I'm like, yeah, that he's now the "this is your brain on drugs" ad in my head, and I'm like, yep, I think I'm going to just say no. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And let's see. And Just Me said, no one goes by that after they buy a gun. Well, that doesn't matter. I'm sorry, but the law doesn't care if you go by that. The law cares that you follow the law. That's like saying nobody follows the speed limit. Well, that's true, but when you get pulled over for breaking the speed limit and their radar gun was calibrated and tested before they pulled you over and they were able to confirm that you exceeded the speed limit, I'm pretty damn sure you're getting a parking ticket. Well, not a parking ticket, a speeding ticket. Although everyone speeds. That's how the law works, and I'm not one to try and mess with the law at all, especially when it's on a federal level. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, as you said, people like, oh, what the hell? Listen, I don't mean it to y'all. I just mean it in that one instance. If y'all know who I'm talking about, y'all know. But that's made sure that I'll never, ever dabble in that area, because that guy is a very bad example of what you become. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next one. And hopefully that was a good live chat. Well, actually, we have some others. Let's see here. Let's see here. Not really seeing a lot of live chats. Remember, everyone, you can throw in a live chat. And if you want to, all you have to do is put @the-enforcer at the front of it. It highlights it in orange for me, and I can see it. And I'd love to be able to answer y'all's live chat questions, because I feel like we're coming around to that here really soon, probably in just a few minutes. So make sure to start throwing in live chats. Good questions y'all want answered, because I'll be making sure to try and answer them the best I can. And so with that, we are on to the next one, which is from James Dunn, who threw in a 10 and said, I do take anti-anxiety depression meds, as I have epilepsy that fries my brain. But the kind I take, I will vouch for I still feel emotions, but your doctor would be best to ask on side effects. And thank you for sharing that with me, James Dunn. But I gotta be honest, I'm always kind of scared of taking really medicine or anything for that matter. That's why I don't really touch alcohol either, because a lot of people drink, and people drink and do it for fun. Many people do. But I'm always a little concerned, what if I'm that person that drinks and then it's not for fun? And that's something that always concerns me a little bit about everything in those regards, is what if I do it and then I'm not like normal people and I end up going off of the deep end? That's always something that concerns me greatly. And that's why I usually tend to stay away from everything. That's why I don't really do, like, if y'all actually knew how I ate and lived, it's very bland. Like, I drink water and milk. Those are really the only two things I drink in life. Water or milk. You would be very hard-pressed to find me drinking anything else outside of that. Don't take headache medicine. If I have a bad migraine, I just power through it. No headache medicine for me because, who's to say that headache isn't a sign? Like, if it gets really bad, who's to say I probably wouldn't need to go, man, I might need to see the doctor about that and pick up on some, I never know. But I do thank you for sharing that with me, James, and letting me know that, because I might not look into it, but it is still good info to know that there are medicines out there like that, that will not make you dead inside. It just helps you out with that. And with that, hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one, which is from ASV, who threw in a 10. And hey! And thank you so much for the support, helping this channel to keep on running. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support does say a lot and helps me to say a lot as well on air and keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one, which is from Polski Ponuri Zunwars, who threw in a $1 donation. And thank you so much for that. You're helping me to keep this thing rolling. And moving on from that, we also have a 8 Australian from Bob Anon, who said, don't forget, modern power grids run as much by microprocessors as coal and oil. That is very true, Bob Anon, and that may be another reason why the Russian energy infrastructure is starting to cripple itself and fall apart, as we're starting to see with rolling blackouts affecting large parts of Russia and occupied Ukraine, one after the other. And I got to thank you for that support, and I hope that does address that well. And moving on from that, we got a 5 Canadian from Matt Share, and he put in a Doge that is putting a thumbs up, and it said, good job, and thank you. And you're doing a good job too, Matt Share. You keep it up, and thank you for the support and helping it to help the channel to keep running. And moving on from that, we have a 8 Australian from Margaret Hemsley, who said, happy birthday, Melody Francis, and a happy birthday to Melody Francis. It is Melody Francis's birthday. I forgot to mention that a little bit earlier, but if you're still here, Melody Francis, happy birthday to you, and thank you so much, Margaret Hemsley, for giving Melody Francis a shout out. It's always great to celebrate birthdays with y'all, and I'm glad to know that you're here tonight as we're celebrating your birthday, Melody Francis, and I hope you're having an amazing one, and I hope the stream is helping it to be good. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one. And also, I saw some people talking about, drinking alcohol and stuff like that. And another thing that is a big reason why I don't ever do anything like that or even think about it is think about how much I work, y'all. It's 20 hours a day and I get about 4 hours of sleep. When do I have free time to even do anything like that? And not only that, recover from it to be able to keep going. If I did something like that, I would throw myself off the wagon. Like it would just be entirely, I would not be able to recover. So that's another reason why I wouldn't do it either, because I have so much to do, so many duties, so many responsibilities. I cannot stop to do anything like that. I am on the hamster wheel. I cannot hop off. But with that, hope that adds a little bit to it, since y'all were saying some stuff about that. But moving on from that, we are now getting down to Leigh Saunderson, who threw in a £2 super chat. No comment, but the support does mean a lot. And I got to thank you for that, Leigh, because every bit of support helps the stream to keep running. And Roxanne Quenneville threw in a 7 Canadian with a dancing pair. And I love to see the dancing pairs. Those are absolutely incredible. And thank you for the support and helping this channel to be possible. And moving on to our next one, we also got a $2 super chat from Philip Fixes LSA. Love to see it, Philip Fixes. Old guard through and through. And he said, doing a great job, Enforcer. Send Matt our love. And I will make sure to, because I never want anyone... I never want Matt to feel like he is unloved. Matthew was an amazing co-host. He is an amazing co-host, and hopefully he will continue to be an amazing co-host here in the near future. And I will make sure to send the Elite Spring Army's regards to Matt. And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is an 8 from Margaret Hemsley. And Margaret said, did you hear about the Aussie defense buying Taipan helicopters instead of, well, burying Taipan helicopters instead of sending them to Ukraine? I did. Don't really know what the decision-making process was behind that. And I just have to say it was really bizarre. And they're also not really a big fan of sending their retired FA-18s either, which is really weird to me too. And I was like, huh, that's weird. But still, can't really knock the Australians. They still have sent a pretty good amount of support for what they've sent. And, you know, it's still weird, the decisions that they make here and there. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is Monsieur Gaston. Gaston! And he said, hit me with that marmot, baby. And oh, we hit you with that marmot. I know that. Would you like a plum? Oh, man. I love the marmot. And I gotta thank you so much, Monsieur Gaston, for letting me hit you with that marmot, because I love the marmot. It's marmot time, baby. And this thing wants a plum. And it do be getting a plum, dagnabbit. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for giving us a little marmot time. And so with that, we're now moving on to our final super chat that I have in the register. In the register. And 1 second. Let's see here. Direct it. There we go. And it's an $8 New Zealand donation from Teslins, who said, chip it in. All right. Yeah, just chip it in, Governor. And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because the New Zealanders do support the fundraisers. I was wrong. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that quite well. And with that, we are now moving on into our live chats. First off is Butchie777's live chat. He said, can you explain the numbers when talking about ammunition size? Sorry, I have no idea about bullets. Well, that is a very interesting point to bring up, Butchie777. And as far as military ammunition goes, it is measured in millimeters, the metric system, which I'm sure folks like you, Butchie777, living in the UK and kind of having a mix of imperial and metric there, and many of our European viewers using raw metric, many of y'all will know what I mean. The measurements are in millimeters. And so a 5.56 round is 5.56 millimeters in diameter, meaning that is how wide the round is, and that, you know, grows in size. So when you hear 20 millimeters, that means that the round is 20 millimeters in diameter. If it's 30 millimeters, it's 30 millimeters diameter, and so on. And the bullets do get extremely larger when we're talking about 5.56 versus 30 millimeter. Let's see here. So, yes. Looks like many people have taken this picture to illustrate. So, this is all in metric. As you can see, it says 5.56 by 45 millimeter, M855 ball. And we can see that down there on the small end. This right here, right beside it, is 7.62 by 51, which technically is the same thing as a 308, but there are some differences. But all the way over here, this big thing here, and you know, when you think about it, you would think, oh, you know, the difference in just, you know, some millimeters, that wouldn't be that big, would it? Oh, no, it is very big. That is a 30 millimeter round, and you can see that it's much larger than a 5.56 round would ever be. But also, what's really cool is that you can see that there's a huge difference in between a 20 millimeter round and a 30. And that's not really that big of a difference. It's a 50% increase in diameter, but you can see that it is a massive increase in almost every other regard. But that's really what the numbers are when we talk about ammunition. It's just really talking about the size of the projectile. And also, when you fire these, it is not the entire thing that goes flying out of the barrel. It's not this whole thing. You see the blue thing at the top, that's the actual projectile. The rest of this thing is called the casing. Or the cartridge more. Well, really the whole thing is the cartridge. This is the bullet, though. And I think this would be the casing, if I remember the terminology correctly. And so the casing here holds a little bit of the shell in it. So the shell actually goes inside of this brass casing a little bit where you can't see it. So it's kind of like the roots, if you want to think about it that way. It's the part of the tree you can't see. It's below the soil. And then the rest of this shell is filled with a little bit of air. And it's also filled with a lot of gunpowder, pretty much, for the best part. And then down at the bottom, if I can find you a picture of this, is this thing here at the bottom of each bullet, each ordnance. And this little weird-looking thing, this round circle that's silvery-looking, that is a primer. And the primer is what you hit to fire the round. So when you hit that, it emits sparks, and it emits sparks straight into that powder that is inside this round up here, this 30mm round. It ignites it all, and the force of that shoves the projectile out of the casing, separating it from the rest of the cartridge, and then it picks up velocity as it goes out the barrel, and then it goes flying towards its target. And that's how it works. And so I hope that explains that well, Butcher777, because that is a very basic level question, but a great one, because not a lot of people know really how the whole measurement thing works as far as ammunition sizes and things like that. And then there's also calibers, which is the imperial measurement for ammunition, but that's a whole other can of worms. But moving on from that, Max Ader said, how do you think the Red Sea will play out in the next few weeks? Very good question. I think the Red Sea is going to play out very tensely, but it's still not going to be anything too severe, at least in my opinion. But I can't really go into much more detail than that because it is a very iffy thing. I can't even really tell you right now where it's going. It could be anyone's game, but it's looking right now like it's in the U.S.'s hand, really the coalition's hands, and we're probably going to continue to bombard the Houthis if they try and attack any commercial shipping. But moving on from that, we also have one from TTC MZX who said, what are your thoughts about the exchange and missile attacks between Iran and Pakistan? All I gotta say, really tense. That's all I can say about it because it is nuts. Because Pakistan is a nuclear power. And the fact that two countries are kind of slugging at each other directly in their own borders, and one of them is a nuclear power, that is actually very interesting to me. But not really a lot more to get from it at the moment because I haven't really been looking into it that much. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And Doug Halstead said, should the Ukrainians consider an airborne operation? Most likely not, because the airspace is still contested. I think that they could consider an airborne operation in a very limited one of small scale once they achieve air supremacy, which hopefully will happen at some point this year. But I hope that does address that well. And let's see. And Dante, sadly, I won't be able to answer that one because I don't know enough to give a intelligent answer on that one at the moment. And also, let me make sure that we're catching up here and making sure to keep up with what everyone's saying because I want to make sure to answer all the questions that are coming in. Let's see. Zygmontas Jankowskis said, recently there were GPS issues in Poland, Sweden, and Lithuania. Apparently Russians are testing their communications disruption equipment in Kaliningrad. Did you hear about this? Sadly, Zygmontas, I would have to declare ignorance on that because I have not heard about that at this time, and I'll have to look into that a little bit more and see what that was really about. But unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to answer that at the moment. But moving on from that, C. Gott said, Enforcer, could Russia still take over all of Ukraine and win the war? I don't think they could at this point because they've exhausted their armed forces so heavily at this moment that I just don't think there really is a chance for them to be able to do anything like that and actually succeed. I think this will probably end up, the best victory the Russians could achieve at this point is a draw, which is still a defeat in their book. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And Philip Fixes LSA said, Enforcer, how does caseless ammunition work? G11. Caseless ammo. Let me go get this real quick because caseless ammo is bizarre. And let me see if I can show y'all one. Yeah, here we go. Oh, heavens. So I think this is the best illustration I think I'll be able to get of it so far. Oh my lord. It's weird. Oh man, I think we have some people here who could probably explain this better than me because it's that space magic crap. And I would have to be honest, I don't have a perfect understanding of how caseless ammo works, but it appears that caseless ammo has a primer. It would have to have a primer because it has to strike something for it to ignite. But it seems as though most of the propellant's actually within the bullet, and I guess that this casing outside of the bullet just burns away. Because if I remember correctly, there was no ejection port on the G11. Apparently everything got burned up when it was fired. But at the same time, I don't think that worked all too well, and I think they ended up running into some jamming issues at some point with the G11, if I remember the testing correctly. But that would be my basic understanding of caseless ammo, is that it does have a case, it's just that it burns up when the bullet's fired, so there's nothing really being ejected in the end. So I hope that does address it well, and also good night, Helland. And moving on from that, George Huey said, what province or, what republic or province in Russia proper do you think will be the first to revolt if this war goes on long enough for Russia to collapse? I think it probably would be Chechnya, because Kadyrov's grip on Chechnya is a really light one. He was kind of installed as a puppet leader by the Russians to appease the people of Chechnya after they were defeated in the Second Chechen War. So I would say they probably would be one of the first to rise up, or really it would be the entire Caucasus Mountain region, including, let's see, Dagestan, Ingushetia, and Chechnya as well. I think all of those would kind of rise up as one big group, because they seem to always be the most volatile of all groups in Russia, really because of the massive cultural differences. Then 420 said, Iran is like Israel, both deny having nukes. And that's true, because we know that the Israelis have nukes, no question. Iran may also have nukes as well at this point. We just don't really know for sure. And the intelligence sector seems to be a little unsure about that as well. But with that, let's see. And I think we are going to be on to the final one of the night. And so the lucky last person through, and the lucky last question of the night is Kevin B., who said, not all caseless ammo is gas-powered. The electric-fired metal storm is chemical propellant, electronic fire controlled. And thank you for sharing that, Kevin B. I've got to be honest with you, that is completely out of my technological expertise, because I only know about normal brass-cased cartridges, really. That's what I know a good deal about, because they all work pretty much the exact same way. But I'll have to look into that a little bit and start learning about caseless ammo, because maybe it'll be something along the lines of the future. Maybe it's a lot like the flintlock was at the mid part of the 1600s, a really interesting invention that had a lot of promise, but they weren't able to really do much with it during that time in history until about the early, the very later part of the 1600s and on into the early 1700s. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. It means a great deal to me that so many people have been here tonight, enjoying the channel, of course sticking with us as we cover the news, and of course just getting a great deal out of it. It means a lot to me, and I'm always honored and so happy to know that I'm able to give the news to each and every one of y'all. If I was not able to do this, I guarantee y'all the world would be a very empty and shallow place to me, because y'all have added so much character and life to what I've done and focused on every single day. It's just as a thing I do, as a part of my life. I got to thank y'all all so much once again for being here with me tonight, and of course I hope I'll see y'all all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Good night, good luck, stay safe, take care, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
The leaf